Select Board meeting for Monday, January 10th. Call to order at 6:31 p.m. This meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. We will start with discussion regarding town response to COVID-19. So we put in the mask mandate effective last week for town buildings. And I believe the Board of Health is meeting later this week to discuss a general mask mandate for the town, for any public places. And that meeting is Wednesday? Okay.
So they're aware that we've already made a mandate?
I would assume they're at least anecdotally aware because of the notice that we did the town buildings mandate.
Yep.
My understanding is the draft they're reviewing is a public places mandate. So it'd be businesses, things like that, not just town buildings, because they would they have the overall public authority. So, Brian, I don't know if you have anything to add, but that's my understanding.
That's my understanding as well.
Okay. Case count, I think last week we had reviewed that we were up at 23 for the prior week, and now we were up at 29 for the last week, so it's continuing to climb.
So that's an additional 5?
It's an additional 29.
Addition of 29.
An addition of 29?
Yeah, so I think our last 4-week running was like 11,
Yeah.
13 new, 23 new, 29 new.
Yeah.
So I think our 4-week running
Close to
total is
70.
something like, 70, give or take. Probably the highest we've had in the entire pandemic, all total.
Yeah.
It's very high. And unfortunately, the numbers are increasing at similar rates everywhere in the county. So that's all I have. Brian, do you have anything else for us?
That's it. This time, we are trying to secure some more testing kits. We've been distributing the ones that we received from the state. And we're just stocking up on supplies for all staff in all buildings.
Is there a way we're making those available to anyone, or is it just primarily through the senior community and the school community?
That was our primary distribution. There have been additional citizens have been reaching out. We have them centralized here at the center for distribution, and what's left is limited. So there have been requests to have more test kits available. We are working with our state vendors to try to acquire more tests, but we're in the queue with everybody else. So as soon as those are received, we'll start a prioritization list of getting them out to staff in locations and getting them out to the public if we have them.
Any feedback on the mask mandate? Any concerns that we implemented?
None that have been expressed to me at this time.
Questions? Other concerns? Okay. Discussion regarding traffic control in Irving Center impacted by the Church Street Bridge. Any updates there?
Nothing new at this time.
I know there had been a discussion, and probably before the first snow, if we've really had one yet, about the sign, the road close sign at the end of church and plowing and all that. It looks like they've reestablished it and left it there through the plowing.
Correct.
And I know Glenn's not here, but any concerns that you've heard?
It
seems like they've been managing.
The snowfall has been light at this point, so they haven't had to pile the snow.
Okay.
I know that there was a concern expressed if they were moving large amounts of snow, navigating around that, and making sure that the travel lanes don't encroach too much into the blacktop. So if it does become an obstacle, we may have to adjust it. But at this point, it's been something that they can work around.
Okay. Anything else on that one?
I have nothing.
Okay. Review Arch Street for sewer main change order requests.
I don't have any to bring to you tonight, but we are meeting on Wednesday. So I should be able to, pending the outcome of that meeting, have information ready for your following meeting.
Okay. Review of the former International Paper Mill RFP draft. Mariah, if you want to join us. I believe there's a late breaking copy from a little earlier today.
So, I've been working on this since the last time we talked about it. I did have a chance to make some more updates today, so I understand if you all haven't had a chance to review them all. I guess generally, do you all have thoughts on what you did get a chance to review?
So I had mentioned to you, I think, after the last meeting, because we didn't have a chance to get to it, I'm still trying to go through the new version of the rubric. Well, it's still a rubric, but a different format. And just trying to, same thing that you did, and I just want to make sure that I can grasp my thoughts around it, that all of the pieces that were lumped in there are still accessible, and so we still have that ability. Just trying to wrap my head around that layout. It's a little bit different. So far, it looks, it's lengthier, it seems, because it's more of a bulleted version. But other than taking some time to figure that out, I think I told you about one typo in there. There's other small, edits, but we can do those another time offline. I don't have a whole lot in there. There was one piece, actually, now that I say that. You'll have to give me a second to find it. It was related to, and it's just more of a, for the board to think about. We talked about under affordable housing, should somebody do a housing proposal as part of their mixed use? And it was whether or not we want to, there was a line in there about more than 40% of their housing being affordable housing.
Page 8.
If you get more, it's more highly advantageous than that. And so, my initial thoughts was, I don't remember having that conversation about maximizing the number of units that were for affordable housing, just the concept of having affordable housing, and that, we put a threshold of a minimum, but we never discussed if they were to come in with 100%, that would be more advantageous or just advantageous, or where that came in. So that was a piece that I was trying to sort of wrap my head around a little bit, how we weight that part of that proposal. So I'm not sure where I fall on that yet. I'm leaning towards saying that it doesn't fall into the highly advantageous, because that, I don't know if we have a reciprocal, I guess similarly, if there's a few more jobs, it's a little bit more advantageous, but I'm not sure those weigh out, because you can build that site out for far more residences than you can for jobs. So I'm not sure how that plays out for equality purposes.
Yeah. I tried to, we had talked about trying to match the residential use with the commercial and industrial uses, and trying to make them so that they would get equal points. And this is my first draft at the rubric, so I completely welcome comments like that, because I wasn't sure the best way to do that. My attempt at that is exactly what you said, which was, excuse me, trying to have it be jobs kind of equivalent to number of units, or not necessarily number of units, but percentage of affordability. I agree, you all haven't had the conversation about whether you want kind of a top end, or what ranges you want in terms of percentage of affordability and things like that. So my first try at that was to have it be more advantageous the more affordable units there were, and more advantageous the more long-term permanent jobs there were. But we can absolutely play around with the numbers or change what type of advantageous those are.
Yeah, and this one wasn't in the rubric. It was
Page 8. I
Oh.
believe that you're referring to.
Thank you. I had to go back, I was,
Before I forget, while he's going there, between page 8 and page 10, there's a call out for a 40% minimum and a 35% minimum. We should just be consistent.
I
Did you already
Thank
catch?
you.
Okay,
Yep.
sorry. We already caught that.
Started,
Okay.
yeah.
I wasn't sure that was your typo. Sorry.
that was one of them, yeah.
Okay.
And one thing that I definitely need to do before we review this again is go through from start to finish, because I've moved things around so many times that I think there's a few things like that where like they might not match up or it's said twice. And so that's something that there's definitely going to be a lot of just going through and making sure that it all makes sense.
Yeah, so Jake was right.
All the
It's in
changes.
page 8. It's the last one where you put a note on there saying, do we need to include information on the housing cap, which we had discussed last meeting. And it's the last line of the first bullet under if residential. It is advantageous to offer more than the required 40%. And I'm not sure we've discussed that component of that, saying that should somebody come in with 100%, affordability, whether or not that's the most advantageous for Irving or not. We haven't had that discussion, so that may need some,
I don't think we've discussed it. I get the idea and the proposed,
Yeah.
I guess I would ask maybe you, but also the board members, do we need to call out whether or not more is more advantageous? Or can we determine that when we're doing the grading? If we have 5 residential proposals, discuss their merits and then determine within that option that we do or don't feel that the higher, percentage is more advantageous. And I don't know if we need to define that as that specifically, or if that can be the discretion of our decisions within that measurement in the rubric at the time. Because to me, that's a relative measurement. If everyone comes in at 40, there's nothing to review there. If we have a range of percentages, then maybe it brings weight, maybe it still doesn't.
The other part of that is that somebody might have 40% of 100 units that are affordable, and somebody else might have 40% of 20 units. So the scale is
Well, and that's
different.
why I'm
Yeah.
wondering if we don't need to
If we
call it
don't-
in here as a percentage means you're going to get a better or lesser, grade, if you will, on that portion of the rubric.
right.
Yeah.
But in totality, when we compare, what are you actually giving us in residential affordability in a residential application or proposal versus someone else who is, if they're not apples to apples, do we then have the flexibility to apply a different grading because of the variation? As opposed to having to put it in words and tell a developer that you will or won't get this.
Yeah, so my thought was, if we do set a minimum of what we're looking for them to do, and right now, that's at 40%, and I'm not saying we stay there or, whatever, but there's a number in there, then that's where we leave it. And it was very open for creativity, building design, layout, proposal structure, all of those components were very open, and we were explicit that it was to be the person giving the proposal, the developer giving the proposal, to be creative and put together a well thought out proposal. And I would like to look at it as a holistic proposal. Maybe they do come in with, only 20 units at 40%, but the rest of their proposal is phenomenal. Or somebody comes in with 60 units and it's different, it gives it a different weight. And I would hate to see us just checking a box saying they met a benchmark of 42%, so they get an extra point, even though it's not really in the best interest of the town based on their overall proposal. So I was just going to, I think to the same point, we get to make that decision after a conversation when reviewing the actual proposal in totality, rather than whether or not it met a threshold.
So I agree. The Senior Housing Committee always talked about 40% and as a minimum. And the International Paper Mill obviously is larger than anything that we were thinking about when the committee was active and we're looking at this back site. But having said that, I don't think that it would be to our advantage to call it out at a higher level. I'd rather leave it to does it make sense for that site to go higher? Or if a developer chose to do that, you know?
And I feel like that's when we, in grading it, have
Yeah.
dialogue and discussion
Yeah.
and analysis of the proposals, and that's where we may,
Yeah.
collectively decide to grade someone higher or lower that gives them the edge, but that's
Yeah.
based on, as you said, the totality. So I
Yeah.
agree with you. I
I
think,
agree, yeah.
I don't think we should call out advantageous above the minimum.
Sure.
I think we call out there is a minimum. If you're proposing this,
Yes.
then it should
Yes.
have,
Yep.
if that's the direction we're going.
One thing that would help me with that is to look at the rubric and then help me craft, so it looks like on page 17, craft the difference between the different advantageous levels, because I tried to make it, the struggle with writing the rubric is you want it to be the most objective as possible, but while also not putting you like strictly into, categories that you then can't break from, which is what you guys are talking about, of you want to have some nuance for what the entire proposal is, but you also don't want it to be completely subjective to what you three individuals think. So I tried to base it off of numbers, which is generally an objective way to do it, but it's also limiting. But if there's descriptors that we can use that are describing your vision for it, I think that's another option. I just don't know how to put that into words.
So you want us to find ways to help with quantitative, is what I'm hearing, advantageous.
Yeah, so for example, so all of the A's, I tried to make the A's under each category comparable to each other. So, A under highly advantageous was more than 40% of the units. Advantageous was exactly 40%. So having what is that range that you're looking for?
I definitely don't have it tonight myself, but I think what I'm hearing from the board is that we wouldn't want to tie highly advantageous to more than 40 as the metric. Maybe there's another housing metric we can put in there, but
So
having at least 40 is needed just to get to advantageous, which I think is fine, personally. If that's the number, we settle on 35, 40, some number. But to go to highly advantageous doesn't just mean you added units that were more affordable units necessarily, I guess, is what I'm hearing.
yeah, and so one of my thoughts, and I think I discussed this, I don't know if it was just with the three of us a while back or in a meeting, but I'm not sure that the rubric, it doesn't have to always encompass everything from not acceptable all the way through. Because maybe, and I'm just, talking in theoretically now, but if we set a minimum of number of units, and it can just be as simple as they met the minimum required or they didn't, and nobody can get highly advantageous on that one metric. So having that pulled out and look at housing, do they have diversity in the number of units? Do they have, just however that is, whatever and that's what you're looking for, is what is that language?
Yeah.
I'm not sure setting the quantitative number at the number of, the overall number of units or the number of affordable units is the measure that gets us to the result. At least not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the ability to look at a package as a whole, and if this person has more units, but it seems to make sense with the package mixed with their mixed use of industrial, and this one has less, but it suits really well with their commercial mixed use, and collectively this is a better package even though it has less units, or conversely, this is a better package because it has industrial, whatever the case may be. It makes it really difficult to create a rubric for that. Because it's very, and I know that because I've sat there and tried to do that language, and I know we're not going to have a meeting for a couple more weeks. I had mentioned before the meeting, that's one of the things that I want to do is really go through and start to hone in on those little things that I, couldn't put words to when I was reading it, and that was one of them.
So
Just-
maybe, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Maybe it makes sense to just have the 40% or whatever number you decide on as the minimum requirement. And rather than talking about the percentage of affordability, maybe we can put in some kind of a language around like more of the compatibility of usage in the entire building, I think is kind of what I'm hearing, like how the different uses and styles of units complement each other, because it might not be just residential units. It might just be how the mix of units all works together to make the entire package. Is that, am I?
That's what it sounds like to me.
Okay.
Is that advantageous, highly advantageous would be that each of those pieces that we're looking for are all incorporated together. Number of units, commercial, a commercial aspect to it, the design, all those together in the right formula that the board is happy with would be advantageous.
Right. Unfortunately, the way the rubric works is all of these are pulled apart.
Yeah.
Right.
So
right.
we do have to pull them apart to some level. But I think if we're talking under the category of proposed uses and affordability, I can, next time we talk, I can try to craft language that is more, or is less about a percentage and more about the compatibility of the affordability and the use generally than a number. And then you can all look at that and see what you think.
Yeah, it's a monumental task. We're not, it's very, I don't want to say it's easy, because it's not, because you've done, so much work to create this. But the objective piece of the numbers and those are a little bit more, they're easier to call out. We're asking for subjective, which is not easy to parse out at all. And I'll continue to try and craft some language, and maybe we can,
Yeah, I'm
bounce some
happy to
ideas back and
sit down
forth
with
and
any
see.
of you if you have thoughts or if you want to email them over. One other part that I wanted to call out, I don't remember what page it's on. But I included, I think it was under the minimum requirements. I included a requirement that it was mixed use, and I wanted to run that all by you. I think that's what I had been hearing, but I had, again, I don't remember exactly what page, but I said something along the lines of that you're not prescribing an exact ratio of the different uses, but that you had to have at least 2 of the 3 being residential, commercial, or industrial, and that there wasn't a ratio you were prescribing, but it needed to be mixed use with at least 2 of those. Does that sound like what you all want?
Excuse me.
Yeah, so I won't speak for the rest of the board, but personally, that's what I was looking for, is I didn't want to see that, any of that property to be used as single use only. My personal feelings on that is that if it's mixed use, then you have more resiliency to change in market, change in financial dynamics that happen throughout the town. So it can be a little bit more sustainable for the town long run to see that be a viable option. So as commercial dies off, you've got either industrial or residential to sustain it, and vice versa. So just, I would like to see that language stay. And I do remember reading that. I don't remember what section it's in. It's a very long document.
Page 8 again.
Page 8 again?
Thank you.
Above where we were before, I think. Town seeks a developer to complete any demolition, design, and construction which results in a mixed use of residential, commercial, or light industrial uses at the site. The ratio of the uses is not prescribed as part of the objective and is left up to the developer to decide, though it should include at least 2 of the 3 use options. I don't know if I want to restrict it. I guess there's probably some examples where I wouldn't like it as a single use, but I don't know if a commercial or light industrial, maybe light industrial, because that's where we focused a lot of time over the prior years. If that was the sole use, that I would be maybe concerned. I don't know if I would be. I know what you're getting at, and the resiliency over time, so that we aren't doing this again in
Right.
some future board,
Yeah.
hopefully. I almost feel like that's more of a rubric advantage as opposed to a minimum requirement for me.
Okay.
Like providing a mixed-use design. And it kind of goes to what you said, how do we define? And I was thinking of like cohesive and integrated, kind of plan, like what you were getting at about the other things we were trying to determine around how to get to highly advantageous. But that's where my mind is going more. Again, it wouldn't be a deal breaker for me either way, but I was leaning more towards that as a higher score in the rubric as opposed to a minimum requirement.
So I'm trying to sort of play around with that idea, like visualizing the rubric and how that lays out. Are you thinking that mixed use, like which one would you put in the highly advantageous? Because you'd have to have some quantifier as to what creates a highly advantageous, whether it's a mixed use with all three, a mixed use with two, and then conversely, what would be the not acceptable? Is it, single track? Because I think you're right. I think, any developer that's going to come in and spend the millions that it's going to take to do it is going to put together a plan that they believe will be sustainable in time, regardless of what me as somebody who's not a developer thinks. And they're probably correct.
Yeah.
Far more experience in that than I have. Go ahead.
If you complete your thought, if you're not there.
No, I don't know how to break that down into, I'm curious what your thoughts are and where that falls in the rubric, because it'll determine how we start finalizing that rubric.
I'll just say generally the one challenge that I have with the rubric is there's no middle ground. There's too high, too low, and no middle. So when I think about it, I don't necessarily think a single use is not advantageous, but it's not advantageous either. It's nebulous. It's the middle. It's neither good nor bad.
So you're looking,
But-
in your thought, then a 5-point system that allows you to basically say, I'm okay with one or the other, and at the end it becomes subjective.
Or there's an there's a not advantageous. There's a I don't know, neutral. Then there's a high, there's a good and a high.
We're legally tied to the language. I think.
I know. And I'm not proposing 5 because we're having a hard enough time trying to get 4. I'm not proposing going to 5.
But I know what you're saying.
I guess don't get caught up in the language of what the category names are.
But my problem with that is and maybe I don't work in public sector except for this, in my day job, so maybe a contractor doesn't look at it that way, a developer, but I'm not going to try to check any boxes that say not advantageous. That just doesn't lend to, I at least met. And that's, I think, the word I'm looking for, meets, right? Like not enough, meets,
Well,
good
that's your
and better. That's
Right.
where my mind is at, but
So your minimum requirement is your meets. So anything that doesn't meet your minimum requirements shouldn't be even in front of you when you have the rubric.
Right.
So that's your baseline. If
But-
you go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but to say not acceptable, but say it met the minimums, it just doesn't. They don't align to me. Like, why are we?
I know.
Who would be talking about it? Now, I understand this is on multiple different points, and you're going to check some,
Yeah.
and some things they're not going to check, and that's okay. Like the idea of if it's light industrial, they're not going to check residential, maybe, or
Right.
I get that. So maybe I need to get away from the
I think
negativity that I'm reading in the not acceptable.
I think my thought is if they include a timeline, they have a great proposal. Their timeline just says in 2 years we'll have a building done. Their proposal might be great, but that timeline, even though they met the minimum requirement of including a timeline, their timeline's unacceptable. So I think that's kind of what you're talking about is that's a very negative connotation. yeah, there's not a great like neutral, like you just did it.
Yeah.
Now,
And maybe not acceptable is just a language thing. But back to your question about how, I guess I was kind of feeling neutral about a single use, feeling advantageous about a multi-use, and 2 or more. And, highly advantageous to have a, very integrated, cohesive multi-use plan, right? So it's not just I threw a building up with some light industrial over here, some commercial over here, and a building over here with some residential. But there's some, like we were saying, some integration, something cohesive that really brings the whole site together, as opposed to you just stood up buildings that did X and Y. If that makes a little more sense about
it does.
how I was visualizing that.
That helps.
And Mariah, I have a question for you. You had mentioned we're tied to the format. So we're tied to the structure in the format of that rubric. However, to get to what Jake was talking about, so that there's not this vast difference between the 4 categories, could we utilize the same language and basically only use, say it's highly advantageous or advantageous, and we just don't use language for the other 2, or they're mirror images, so the point value is not so diverse. And I guess my train of thought is, for something that we're fairly neutral on, we just want to make sure that it meets, but we don't want to have to dive into the nuance of all the pieces of that without looking at the whole project.
So I have one question for Brian, which was, I didn't get a chance to look this up before I came, but I saw an example RFP that had 3, and I think it was just highly advantageous, or unacceptable. But I think we're tied to 4.
Was that a real estate transaction RFP?
Yes, is that why?
As I'm going through my thought process, the RFP,
Brian, if I may interrupt you, excuse me, can we just, if there's any conversation, please take it out of the room. It's hard to hear up here while that's going on. Thank you.
the RFP process under Chapter 30B is very specific to supplies and services. The section under Section 16 that deals with real estate transactions allows you to use a request for proposal process, but is not as prescriptive. So by default, we tend to all follow the very prescribed process under the rest of 30B for services. So with that being said, I think there may be space for some flexibility in the way that you structure your comparative criteria in the grading rubric. But it's traditional that most people follow what we've all been trained to do in terms of a standard services contract. So if you've seen an example of 3, I would assume in that case the community made a decision that narrowing it to those categories fit their programmatic goals better.
So we
you may
could
have-
potentially narrow it to 3, where 1 is positive, 1 is neutral, and 1 is negative.
Yes, as long as once you advertise it, like all the other conditions of a 30B, those are now the rules that we are now playing by. Once
Okay.
you've put it out there.
Well, and it really may just be a matter of I need to get not advantageous to be in my head. That just says you don't have it's not a bonus. It's not better than. It's just meets, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably more of just a nuance that I'm not liking the wording, but that's it meets. It's a minimum, right? It's not great. Versus not acceptable, which says, you didn't, it's poor, right?
Right. Yeah, on paper, it may meet a criteria, but the actual implementation of it is not there. That's the way.
Right. I don't want to end the discussion prematurely, so we can come back to this after the joint meeting, if you all want to, or I know a lot of the substance was about how do we get a better rubric, so maybe we're there, but I don't.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know, unless
yeah.
there's other dialogue, Mariah, that you think you need, or if there was other parts of it that you had questions on. I think the overall document itself, and I see that the tracked version that you sent was a lot about formatting and duplication and cleaning all that up, and that's, there's a lot of extensive work there. The substance of the rubric, to me, is the only piece that's remaining. I
Okay.
didn't have a lot of concern with the rest of the document, other than maybe a typo here and there, things like that. So I don't feel we have to come back to it unless Mariah has more questions that she would like answered from us, or,
So, one thing, well, I guess I have two things. So, one is if you could all email me over any of those small typo edits or any like comments you have that just didn't make it into this conversation, that would be helpful. The other thing that would be helpful is if you're okay with me, the next option that you look at, me accepting the track changes and only doing new ones going forward, because it's about to get really, really messy the more I keep working with it. So if you're all okay with me making a new copy, saving a new copy, accepting these changes, and then the next one will only change things that have been changed since you saw it tonight. If that makes sense.
yeah.
I think there's too much in there for me to say I'm okay accepting it as it is right now until I've read through it again myself. I don't know about.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen
Yeah,
all
I
of the, I haven't been able to, we just got it just before the meeting.
Right,
So
yeah.
I would need at least a few days to be able to really go through it and make sure that all of those last minute changes that are tracked in there. you
Sure.
know, and give you back any of those edits, but I think
I agree.
individually, if we can all just email Mariah over the next week to say that the next copy is clean, yes, that would be
Okay.
much easier to follow.
I only had one thing, we have something coming up at 7, and so I don't want to go too far afield with it, but on the first page, we talked about the town intends on subdividing the parcel to retain ownership of the undeveloped portions, and when we talked about that in the first page, we talked about the riverbank protection. And I'm fine with the way it's written and what it says. I guess my only concern is that, to me, that means that any work that needs to be done on the riverbank protection is going to be done by us. And we haven't talked or had a discussion about how are we going to put some funds aside, or should we be thinking or talking about putting something aside to do that? If we're not going to say to the developer, this is what we want to see happen with the riverbank in conjunction with the Conservation Commission, and you're going to do it.
Let me recommend then we'll table this and come back to it later. Because I think we can give it a little more time tonight and maybe move it a little further along. I think it's a great question. I think we need to talk further about how do we deliver that. And so I want to give it the time it needs. So I think to your
Okay.
point, let's come
Yeah,
back to it then.
sure.
Thank
and
you.
we'll go into the joint meeting and we'll resume after. Thank you, Mariah. So with that, we are short on. I will call the joint meeting with the Finance Committee to order at 7:09 PM. Welcome, everyone.
So, ladies,
I'm smiling under here.
I saw someone who had a mask that had that artwork on it, and I was like, okay, that's pretty good. The first topic was revisiting discussion from last week regarding the Arch Street for sewer main borrowing, and if everyone had some time to think about and/or discuss it. Brian, did we get any further information from the treasurer? And
I will forward
David?
that all to you this evening. We have received additional analysis that David's done for you all.
okay,
And they wondered if you wanted them back for the 24th to finalize that conversation with the two boards.
but I mean, before we answer that, I guess is there any comments or questions after we've had a week to think about the proposals, the ideas? I'm sure there's more numbers, but.
So my initial thoughts are still, I think borrowing is not a bad thing. And I think, if we're strictly looking at, can we pull it from somewhere and pay for it? And the overall long-term cost may be a little bit more to borrow. Looking to the future of all of the projects that we have, I don't think we have financial capacity to fund them all, so. And every time a borrowing option comes up, it's always, well, let's just take it from stabilization because it will save $40,000 over the life of, this project. No. I'm getting the cube over there, and I never put my mic back on. So we constantly are saying, we'll do it the next time. We'll look at it the next time. So I think, given the nature of the number of projects that we have coming up, I still lean towards borrowing for this one in some capacity. And I'm not sure. I'd like to get the numbers back from Bill? No, Brian.
David.
David. Yeah, send my names, too many of them. Yeah, having him come back in maybe to review those, if we have more questions on the 24th, would be a good thing.
Yeah, I'd like to see what numbers, they come up with and be prepared for the 24th.
My thoughts are, and I think I mentioned this last week, is, looking at what our repayment term would look like, and then internally looking at how fast can we pay that off. So we don't have to, we're not locked into, say, a 20-year term, but if we did a 20-year term and then we said, okay, let's not incur any penalties, but we want to pay it off, right at year 8, so we don't have any penalties incurred. What's that cost to the town? And does that give us capacity to do more projects simultaneously? Because we have several. We have 2 bridges, we have a road repair, we have, there's just enough infrastructure that I think we might have to look at long-term. For debt service, what can we fold into our annual budget for the next 15 years to make it feasible to get all the projects done, rather than upfront all the money, dwindle it down, and then have to pay all of that back before we do our next project. So that's where I was leaning.
Yeah, it was a little follow-up from the treasurer too after the meeting was that the 20-year bond would have an 8-year call, meaning you can't pay any additional principal. Maybe that went to everyone, but just for the audience.
I saw that.
Meaning no prepayment, and a 15-year would likely have the same
Right.
for the first 8. However, I thought over what you said, and I think the same after going through the capital planning meeting as well, and all the other things that we've been working on. I think even if we can't repay that back sooner than 8 years, even if we had the capacity, the idea that maybe we do some rolling projects that are out of feasibility and stabilization, and some rolling projects that are out of borrowing. And as those get paid off, if we have capacity to pay this one early, that might be 8 years from now.
Right.
If we strategically start a different project in 2 years and we borrow from our savings for that one, and we have other ones that are in borrowing different stages, by the time we have capacity again, we may be there anyway.
Yeah.
If you follow what I was trying to say. But
Yeah, I do. And
convoluted.
just to add to that, I think a little bit is, when I'm talking about an early repayment, is we could create a single line account where we're, replenishing the it's already there, stabilization, knowing that would be earmarked to pay off, say, at year 8. So we're just earmarking it and saying, don't use X amount annually because we need to hold that. We know we're going to have a balloon payment that we want to make in 2030, and so estimating what that would be, and so we're planning a little bit along the way to make sure we can do that, but we're not held to that should something come up. So we're building that up with an earmark that's what we want to use it for, to pay these off early. But should another July 18th happen, and we have other, I'm just saying, should we have other projects that come up, we've earmarked that to do an early payoff, but we're not bound to that should we need it for something else. So working that line item in for overpayment on debt service, and just hold it until we can make that, until we satisfy the 8-year call. So.
anything else on that?
I agree. I don't think I'd be interested in any borrowing that was long-term. I'd like to keep it as short as possible. I think so we can pay it off as soon as possible, and that we use the financial reserve policy to figure out how to, what portion of free cash or stabilization or how we can use those resources to pay it off quicker and to get to whatever the next issue is, that the next bridge or the bridge too far comes to mind, but kind of says exactly the situation that we're in, that there's a lot of things to do.
Yeah. And the cost of debt service is not something we've done much with, so
Right.
it depletes our ability to do these quick repayments like we enjoyed with the library, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Next topic, review of the FY23 operating budget requests.
Should be in section 6.
And the first one up is the Board of Health. If you'd like to come up to the table. Welcome, Leo.
How you doing here?
Good. Just a moment while I'll get to that page. If you want to just give us a real quick, like, high level of kind of how the last year was, or the current year has been, and then kind of what the goals are for next year.
Okay.
From the budget
Well,
standpoint.
overall, I think we're doing pretty good at the Board of Health. What happened is that as you know, a lot of the homes that were kind of like needed repaired and stuff, we're just about ending with that. So that's come along real good in the town of Irvine. Right now, we're dealing mostly with, as you know, with the COVID and stuff, with the nurse. That's come along real good with the town. Communication between us and FERCog and the nurse and the Board of Health, I think everybody knows, has come along real good. Right now, as you know, we have, if you don't know, we have 3 towns, Shrewsbury, Irvine, and Northfield. The budget was increased probably about $700. Overall, we're doing real good, I think, in the town of Irvine. Very pleased. We've got 2 good members on the board, Jaden Baller and Jeffrey McAndrews, doing a fantastic job. So I think next year is going to be a lot of fun working with those 2 people. I really do.
Okay. And then the mosquito district fee is the kind of the item that came up over the summer, right? With the trying to opt out of the state mandated mosquito control, and then that was denied. And then obviously surrounding community towns are coming together to come up with this district to try to
Yeah.
have a better option next year. So that's the 5,000. That's the initial. Brian, is that this? Is that the? Is that expected to be recurring cost of 5,000 a year? Is that?
I
Is
think
that
so,
what we're
yep.
expecting?
Yep.
Correct. Any questions for Leo? Any concerns?
I just have a couple of things. As you know, we're meeting Wednesday, just the 3rd, and we're talking about a mask mandate.
Okay.
We'll be talking about that. And another thing on the agenda is we're looking at coming up with some kind of a survey to send out to the townspeople, asking them what they would like to see more in regards to health issues in the town, stuff that we can provide. Because I'm hearing things from people, why can't we do this? Why can't we do that? And so I said, we talked to Betsy and the rest of the board. We're going to discuss that Wednesday, along with Brian, some kind of a survey, how we can get it out and ask people, well, what would you like to see in the town? So we get an idea what the rest of the people in the community want to see done in regard to helping them with the health issues. As you know, we're all getting a little bit younger as the years go on. So
I feel that every year.
yeah, yeah, tell me about that. So.
That sounds great. I mentioned earlier on our COVID topic that you were all meeting on Wednesday, and
Yep.
that believe you were reviewing a public place mask mandate
Yep.
potentially.
Yes,
so,
yeah, yeah. I'm sure it's going to go into effect, so.
okay. As you may be aware, last Wednesday, we put it in for our town buildings. We put it
Yes,
in. So,
yep, good.
so that one's standing right now. So,
Good.
the survey idea is great.
Yep,
I'm sure we can.
good.
Yeah, I was
Find
just
a way
going to
to help
jump in and
support
say,
that. Go ahead.
being a proactive board sounds fantastic.
Yep,
Because
yep.
you know, I know it's hard at times to have a board that is just reactive to issues that are having, focusing on just the negatives,
Yeah.
of, concerns and complaints that you're dealing with, to hear that the board is saying,
Yes.
what does the town, what are our residents looking for, and
Yeah.
how can we meet that need? That sounds fantastic,
Well,
and
one
I
of-
commend you for that.
Yeah, because one of the things was the nurse that we have here with Paula, working with Paula, she's doing a great job here with her, between her and the nurse. The people come here, get what they need done, and Paula's always here to help the people too, so it helps us, the Board of Health too,
Yep.
so, which is really good, so.
That's great. Anything else?
Nothing else?
No, I
Okay.
don't have it.
Well, thank you, Leo. Have a
You're
good night.
welcome.
Yeah, thank you,
Gentlemen,
sir.
thank you.
Oops, I lost my agenda page. Senior Center.
Looks like she stepped out for a moment.
We seem to have misplaced the director. Momentarily.
She is
If she
probably-
heard that, she'd show right up, I
Yeah,
promise.
no,
But
she's probably working in her
no,
office. Yeah.
we can move on and come back when she.
Oh, she's coming.
Oh, you're all good, Paula. Come on up when you're ready. It's all good. Welcome.
Thank you.
So I'm not on the right page, but when I get there, we've been kind of having everyone go through a little bit of the highlights from the current year,
Sure.
and then talk a little bit about opportunities and challenges for next year, and then the budget.
Okay. Well, as you know, it's been a challenge for everybody. We actually closed March 16th, 2020. We came back in June 2020, kind of remotely. And then we reopened on July 7th, 2021. And when we reopened, it was as if we had never closed. Everybody was so excited to get back. So overall, what we've been doing is, well, when we were not here, we were providing a lot of wellness checks. We were providing a lot of information about COVID. We've probably helped over 200 people get COVID shots, including booster shots and so forth. We also had meals that we prepared. I became the cook, and we prepared meals for when we were closed. And we made 100 meals per month, and we provided them to 50 people because our goal was to try to get them 2 or 3 meals with one time. And they really enjoyed that. It was great. After that, we're still in the COVID mode, so to speak, and we've decided that we needed to do something, or not we, me. And I wanted to, there was an opportunity that came up from the Mass Council of Aging, and it was a grant. In one of the grants, it had several opportunities, but I wanted to address isolation and loneliness, and that's really what we were finding with all our seniors. So I applied for the grant. I received the $3,000, and my goal was to have about 100 gift baskets made for them. I was gonna make them, along with Becky's help. But this was a threefold situation. We first of all had the opportunity to be able to call everybody and kind of do a wellness check. When we did that, we also brought to their attention that this is, we're going to really make it special for you. So we want to ask you what some of your personal favorites are. And they did that, probably a little bit too much. And then what we did was we comprised the baskets. It took us 3 months to do this. We did 25 at a time. We ended up only doing 82 people. The 100, I just couldn't go anymore. This looked like a warehouse in here. And what happened is that, so the second time was to call them and tell them everything was ready. and that we would be over to visit them. And so they loved that. And then when we brought it, the average basket was $35 to $40 each. And with that, we also included why we were doing it. We asked them if there was any other help that they needed, any other help that they wanted. We include a self-addressed envelope in the basket. And the way that we incentivized them getting back to us was we told them that if they did that, they would go into a drawing because we had $25 gift certificates at the Big Y. And we received about 98% return. So everybody was thrilled. They wrote wonderful things. So that was one thing that we did. Well, that was another thing that we did. But majority of the time, we were pretty busy. And there was a lot of mental health issues that we ran into. We gave a lot of guidance of where to go, who to call. We had to assist a lot in many ways. So that's kind of what we did. Other activities, when we did get back on July 7th, we opened it up. And like I said, it was like we would never went away. Lisa White came back here, and it was Ask the Nurse. We had wellness classes. We had fitness classes, and we started that kind of we were only having a certain amount of people to begin with, and then after that it went to about 25 people, and they are still here today, coming all the time. And so right now we have 8 exercise programs a week, and that's what we had. We had the quilters come back, and they loved it. We just restarted bingo again. Oh, God. Okay, yeah. And we have cards and snacks daily for everyone. We continued all the time with our brown bag food pickup. That never went away. And we continued, even though we didn't have a van driver, we were able to contact FRTA and get every single ride that they needed because people still needed to go to the doctor and so forth. But we still delivered brown bags. I called FRTA and I asked them if we were still able to use the van, if no one else was in it, and he said yes. And so we delivered the brown bag, we delivered the food, who couldn't get here. And then anything else that they needed, they called us, trust me. We got a lot of phone calls. We continued with a lot of Shine appointments. We actually saved people thousands of dollars with all the insurance directions that we were able to give them. And overall, everything else, the handyman started up again in July, and he agreed that he would do it. I just wanted to make sure he was comfortable doing it. And other than that, that was it. The COA has not met yet, and we will be doing that coming up because we just want to go over kind of like the year in review. We have had no bus trips, no excursions, nothing. So other than that, we're kind of hoping for a much better year this year.
We'll cross our fingers.
Do you have any questions?
Not on the current year.
Okay,
Myself, anyone?
Not on the current year, no.
okay.
How about looking forward?
Looking forward.
Yeah, what are you looking at for 23?
Okay, you want me to talk my budget now? Or do you want me to talk about ideas?
Yes and yes.
Yes.
Okay. Ideas for next year, well, obviously, I've applied for a grant from a cultural grant. I did receive it. The cultural grant, I wanted to include the school and the seniors together. And I did talk to the school about it, and they were a little bit uncomfortable, and I said, you know what, I'm gonna go for it anyway, and if we can't have it, we can't have it. But if I didn't do it, I wouldn't have known, because you had to have the cultural grant at a certain amount of time. So we did receive it. It is a grant, it's called Dramatics, and it's been approved, and we will it will be the school children, and we're hoping to have it over there, and grandparents. Because we just think that it's probably going to take up too much space if we include the parents also. It's a group that's almost like I don't want to say a Blue Man's group, but what they do is they take average items and they make it into instruments. And they also have a Q&A with the kids and so forth. It's really highly rated. So we can do that anytime next year. We hope that I'm getting called for bus trips on a continual basis, and I don't think we're ready to go there yet, especially lately with what's been going on. We are doing 2 different classes right now. It's called quilling and also paper making classes. That's done weekly. We have other activities. Like I said, the quilters have been back, and that's a great group, and they continually to bring in more people all the time. And they're here from 8:30 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon every Friday. And they take this whole room up, or not, well, half the room, and they're making beautiful things. We hope next year we will have our craft fair. We didn't have it this year, but what we did is we sold several craft items. We did well for not having a craft fair. We're just trying to be innovative. Actually, it's me. They keep on calling me the salesperson from here, but anyway, we want to get back to everything that we did before plus. And we always try to stay busy, and we have a very young group of seniors that come here. Now, it's changed a lot. It's changed a lot. We used to have my buddy Thelma, and we miss her, so. Do you have any questions about next year? And, if this doesn't get better, we'll continue to our wellness checks, and we'll continue to call people a matter of fact, I just got a hold of Dick Newton and asked him for a list of people 65 and older for some project that we're working on. We're trying to just, keep everybody in the loop. We've called many, many people, like I said, about vaccines, COVID, information. We continue to keep the around town full with information, and that'll probably never change, so.
Questions on the plans? There's some budget increases in there as well.
Okay, so the budget increases are all the things that we're doing really didn't affect the budget. The budget increase was a total of $4,800. And the reason for that, there are just 2 majors that affected it. One of them was the phone internet cable. We had an upgrade on that. And that was, it's the the internet, the Wi-Fi upgrade, so forth. The board agreed to it, the FinCom agreed to it, the select board agreed to it, and what it did was we had a budget of $5,000, and that was short around 3,000. Let me see, how much was it? We were short. Well, we had 5,000. It comes to per year $8,775, and I rounded up to 8,800 to not throw the $25 in there. Appropriated was 36, expended was 79, and then we appropriated 5 and did not realize. Now, when we say this this category or this account includes the phone, TV, shared town-wide phone bill, and upgraded internet town business. So in order for us to make that payment that we get monthly, it comes to $8,800. The other change that I put in is aging, Council of Aging professional and technical. What's in that category is we never really took care of the grease traps here. And we would all of a sudden decide, gee, we should take care of that. So we are integrating that into having it done twice a year, which is $600. We also, I also found out when we should calibrate our ovens to make sure that they're warming correctly. One was like 500 and one was like 350, and we thought that no wonder things weren't working correctly. So I called the school. I got who they had serviced their units, and come to find out, just one change, and it wasn't much, cost us $1,200. That was never, we've never had miscellaneous kitchen appliance services. So I just increased that so we would be ready if we did. Also, the fire service is under the professional technical. That's the monitoring of the building and so forth. They had a 2% increase. So overall, that was the change there. And that was just $1,000. So overall, I'm asking for $4,800 total. That does not include the 2%, that does not include any salary, part-time, or anything of that nature in there. I did not include that in the $4,800 that I'm asking for. I believe that it is on the paper, Brian, on the top, but I didn't include it in my total that I was talking about here today. So there's only 2 items that I'm really,
But there's
Yeah.
one more.
there's one more? Oh,
The My Senior Center.
oh, my senior center. How come I didn't put that in there?
Well, it's in ours
Yeah,
for 1,800.
Yeah.
You did magically over
I
here.
did, that's $1,800.
Yeah.
I didn't, I should have put that in.
well, you did.
I did, okay.
Somehow it got here.
And I can tell you that that's been really great. I was never 100% on board with that, but it has a tremendous ability to do so many things. And if you are going to have the meeting here every Monday, we can actually set you up. That's all you'd have to do is scan your card in. It has your people, it has your name, it has your address, it has everything, and we can do a total printout for you all the time from it. So, and it also has the ability to call people and tell them that there's no meeting or there's a meeting. So it has a lot of things that we haven't even touched yet.
Can you tell the group what it is? I know what it is, but can
Oh,
you tell
I'm
them
sorry.
what
My
that
senior
is?
center is designed for a senior center, and it is the computer out there. It is. It has a great amount of programs. It has constant tutorials if you need information. There's little key cards that are almost like your Stop and Shop barcode. And what you do is you fill out a paper that we have here, and we fill out that sheet of paper, and then we implement all that data into the system. It's not too much personal data. It doesn't ask you anything, but what it does is I can print out anybody about anything that comes into the building. It's also a great way for contact tracing. So that and we encourage everybody to come in, use that key card, so that we really make sure that we're watching everything. I can see the duplicated, non-duplicated. That system alone has saved a tremendous amount of time when I fill out the formula grant, and along with any other grant. It gives you percentages like male, female, everything. It has everything on it, and you just and then you do get an update, and they will service it. You have 24-hour call if you have anything that you need serviced about it. So it's been a great addition. I wish I did it years ago. Do you have any question about the My Senior Center? I don't want to say most places. A lot of places do not have it because it's a little intimidating to start with. But once you do it, it's great. That's why, like tonight, when you folks come in, that's all you would need to do is if we gave you a scan card, you just scan it in and you just press, because I already made a format for you, you just press that this is a select board meeting. And you don't have to do another thing. It gives you the time you logged in. It doesn't tell you the time that you leave because it's all the way as long as you need to stay. But it really has a lot of data that if you wanted to utilize it too, you could.
And ours has your staff, your step increases and stuff in here too, so. And your increased
Yes.
request for the cook.
Yes.
So that's in here, but questions on the budget
No question?
or anything else?
I just have one question about the request for the increase for the cook position. Do you think that's enough to attract somebody? And it's a real, because I think it was
know.
about $1, I think you added about $1.80, something like that, an hour to bring it up to 19.
The only reason I went that way, Scott, is I was comparing things to other places, like other senior centers, other cooks. I talked to people at LifePath that handled the meals there. They thought that even a $17, $18 an hour is probably not going to get anybody. I certainly didn't want to go to over 20. So I thought, try 19.
Yep.
That didn't work either. So, as you know, and you hear all the time, the workforce is just not out there yet. And it may be for some professional job, but it certainly isn't out there for a part-time job in the middle of the day. You know, this is really a mom job, possibly, maybe someone that's retired, and it's just not, we've got no response whatsoever. Did you think that the 19 was too high?
No, I was actually wondering, you know, if it was enough to attract a candidate to actually do it. And I noticed that it's not so, the description is sort of misleading how it says cook. It encompasses a few other things, and it's, you know,
Right,
it's
right.
prep, but it's also cleanup, and there's other components to it. And I wasn't sure, I had a couple of questions. One, could that position encompass more? Is there a need to encompass more, and maybe look at it, how it falls in our, it should be on our pay scale. It's on
It
there.
is,
I
yeah.
believe it
So the
is.
19 should fall in that range, but should that job description change enough where maybe it would require a step up, more of a professional, you know, assistant? I don't know, you know,
Yeah.
and I guess my question is there a need for more capacity out of that role to make it more attractable to a larger pool of people?
I understand where you're coming from. I think what's happening right now is we could get LifePath in here. They would still come in. We would do it 5 days a week. Unfortunately, we have found that the attraction with LifePath is just not there. It's like the same Meals on Wheels food. And unfortunately, if the only people that were coming are the ones that really were kind of bored and didn't know what else to do, they weren't coming here for the food, that's for sure. When we cooked, we found that we were doing 30 or 40 at lunch, and people made an effort. In addition to that, that effort went further. Oh, I'm going to join another exercise class. Oh, I'm going to come here for this. And it was a way of building for more people to come. The one thing that we wanted is I was still going to remain with LifePath 1 or 2 days a week because there are some benefits. The benefits is LifePath, of course, pays for it. Okay, they pay for their cook and they pay for their food, and they ask for a small donation of $3. But they also provide paper towels, they provide small plates, they throwaway. And they provide a lot of things. So it was a benefit for us to have both. As far as the cook goes, we could do, if we had someone here that was, like you talked, Scott, we could actually have open for, if you want a breakfast bagel, to give you that, but I don't think we're there yet. I think that when we would get there is if we actually had senior housing back there, or we had something more that would draw some more people in. But that job, it's a really great job for the amount of hours that we want. And maybe we're too technical in the newspaper about it. Because really and truly, Becky and I was doing it, and it doesn't take a lot. It just takes someone that is dedicated to wanting to put together a menu. And our biggest challenge always was getting the food. So we had to shop, and that was part of it. But we started to work with the school a little bit. But the sizing of the product, like they would get in 10 number 10 cans, we'd get 6 or 8 of those, half our closets filled. If we, so it was much easier to just shop when we needed it and to work that way. So it's a progression. And as long as we had someone that was interested in the cooking part, and Becky and I both help with the cleanup. So, and then, the more, we can always get a volunteer too. The ladies are here, they want to wipe off the table, they want to do things. So we could get that too, but
Okay.
it's a good stepping stone, but we have had no interest in it. Unless you know somebody, I would like that.
Yeah.
Scott, you available?
Scott,
Unfortunately, that
You're
will
welcome.
cut into my
This is a
my
great
annual hours. It's
atmosphere
a
to
municipal
work in.
job, so
Oh, that's right.
as a retiree myself, I can't
You're
take
limited.
too many hours.
Yeah, I also
expanded that, though.
contacted the tech school. Met them on Zoom several times. One of the tech people came here. They looked at the kitchen, because we really thought that if there was some way that we could plan ahead, order 3 meals, even 4 meals a week, and say, okay, I'm going to order 30 people, and I'm going to have it. You don't have to make it that day. It can be ready. I've also looked at Freshly. I've looked at the meals that get delivered. That's all we're looking for the seniors, is good food that tastes good, that it's something that you want to eat, and not something that you wouldn't want to eat. And I think that's fair to say. I don't want to say too much. I mean, I'm on television, so. Okay, I got to be a little careful.
Fair enough.
I do like to eat, Paula. Thanks for acknowledging that.
I do too. I do too, but I'm on a diet, so. So
I know you
we're
had
open.
I know you had the question. I don't know that we had any answers.
No,
I don't know
I
if
do have
you got
no
what you were looking
The-
for. Or,
the- No, she did answer it, and it was, whether or not there was a need to increase the capacity of
Right.
that role in order to attract, but it sounds like there isn't. So you're
I don't think-
you're keeping it as a part-time, a small increase to the hourly, and see if that'll attract
See if it attracts.
a couple of applicants for
Yeah.
it. And it might just be a timing thing.
Right.
Of,
And-
of,
it's a
right.
tough time right now.
of when you're going to get a pool of people that are
Well, that's
interested.
part of it. The people that usually apply are, and I don't want to sound prejudiced about this, but it's the moms. And a lot of the mothers are, home with the kids because of COVID. So maybe it'll open up. I don't know. The other thing is that we still are looking for a van driver. And we do have 3 people interested. The van, once we start that service again, but we didn't, even though we didn't offer it from Irving, we still offered it from FRTA. And I was able to call for every single ride, make sure they got picked up and delivered. But it'd be nice to offer the shopping trip, like to Walmart or something like that once a week, and to like maybe Food City once a week, to try to just give as many options as they can. And I think we're going to be getting a new van pretty soon, so can't wait for that.
Okay. I think we are all set.
All set?
Thank you, Paula.
Great.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Next up on the agenda for tonight, Veteran Services.
Very straightforward.
Looks like it's a-
slight reduction in our assessment for FY23. So you actually have a slight decrease, and at this time, I'm not recommending any changes to the amount we budget for veteran benefits.
Any questions or concerns?
None.
Next up is Board of Library Trustees in the Public Library.
Are you aware if anyone had asked the interim director to be here tonight or not? I put in a call, but I didn't get the call back.
The reminder was sent out to the department last week, to the trustees, so I'm not sure who had a conversation
Okay.
with the director.
Well, she didn't mention it to me, so if there are questions, I can attempt to answer them here. I guess our highlights and challenges, I guess.
Well, before you start, Dan, if I may,
Sure. Unless
maybe
you'd
this
rather
goes,
have her come.
I'm sorry?
Unless you'd rather have her come a different time and explain this.
No, that's fine. I believe the request is the trustee or representative. My only question to you, and I don't know there's any significance either way, but are you switching hats? Are you holding both hats? And if you are, then we won't have a quorum. So that's my question of the FinCom, if you are
Yeah, I don't want to get
recusing
involved.
from that to do the trustee piece. So I'm just, not to put you on the spot, but to ask what,
I don't want to run afoul of any conflict, thing.
right.
If you lose your quorum, I don't know if that, what you want to do with that, if you'd rather have this a different discussion at a different time.
I think we're gonna have other meetings, we could always invite you to come back another time.
I was
What
going
I
to say,
was
if we can
thinking.
review what was submitted,
Yeah.
and if we have questions, we can always forward those to the interim
That may be the
director as
best
well.
thing to,
Okay.
just to allow another night when hopefully we have a majority of the FinCom who is not
Okay.
affiliated.
Okay.
And we can either have yourself or a trustee or the director, interim director join us.
Would you like me to
Do we,
do that to the 24th?
yeah, I was going to say, we should be able to fit it on the 24th, January 24th. So we'll move that one to January 24th. And the next one is the Recreation Commission and Park Maintenance. Come on up, Greta. Welcome. I assume you are representing this evening. So generally, we have everyone go over kind of the current year highlights and challenges, and then goals and initiatives for the next year, and any changes in the budget. I'm assuming a narrative is pending because I don't
A
see one in here
narrative
yet.
is pending, yes. We're waiting for the review from the chair and getting that out. So I apologize for the lateness of that. The shift in the schedule kind of took us by surprise, and it hit at a point when we had a program coming. And so we switched our focus to the program and totally missed the deadline for the narrative. The challenges have been basically that COVID, the same thing as the year before, where with COVID continuing and the precautions continuing, having group sports proved challenging, and finding a location that would be safe for those was challenging. Our summer parks program was canceled again because of COVID concerns. And we were having challenges finding staffing up until this fall. And then this fall, we were able to start again with outdoor sports. We did manage to have some basketball clinics in small numbers. We could not play games. So with recreation, the mixing of the different towns, the intramural sports, inside locations in a gymnasium with the work that was going on in the elementary school, finding a location for sports that was safe and healthy. That was a big challenge this year for us. We have been in discussions with the school and with some changes and adjustments, we have been able to offer sports. Now we can have basketball inside. We can at least have practice, not games, but we can have practice. We've located some new coaches, and we are looking at restarting the summer parks program. We'll be in discussion with the school committee about holding it on the grounds at the school again. And we are revisiting our application, job description, pay rates, and numbers, ratios for counselors and the Parks Program Director, which is a challenging position to fill because it is seasonal and it requires somebody of a level of experience and skill who normally would have a year-round job. So finding candidates for that, now that Marissa Spalding has stepped out of that position a couple of years ago, finding somebody to fill her shoes who can meet our scheduling requirements and also is comfortable working with kids right now is proving challenging. But we're working on that, and we're working on, I think, those are our biggest challenges, other than not really having a location at the moment. And our successes have been finishing the revamping of Park Street Park, and also restarting the basketball team with even more vigor. We have a number of people who are on the waiting list for the youngest group. In fact, I'm surprised that the coaches decided to accept as many as they did. I think we have about 19 students in the youngest beginning basketball, which shows that sport's going to continue through the years if there's that much interest at that age. And then also working on Church Street was finally finished. That was a nice long project. And we're starting to look at Zielinski to get the playground set up and get some plans in place to get that ADA compliant and do some upgrades there. So right now, we're still working on year 2 of our master plan with some changes and adaptations, which we expected to happen on the way. So we are requesting level funding for now, and I think that's about it. The changes, we'll see what the changes are as we come out of the pandemic. I hope we're coming out of it in the coming year or so.
There was some signage that was supposed to happen at Church Street Park?
Yes, there's the signs for the park rules and regulations use. We've finally decided on a short abbreviated list for that, so now it's a matter of getting it printed and produced and putting them up at all the parks.
Okay.
So that's going to happen this spring.
Thank you.
Just to follow up on that real quick, is there a plan to have the name of the park as a signage at the parks?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know what the plan is right now for Church Street Park. There will be something. I'm not sure. We haven't figured out. We were talking about doing a sort of a
Say
unified.
it's on the list?
It's on us.
Oh, it's on
Yeah.
us.
The signage project was put on pause last year, and in our appropriation for the townwide signage includes new park signs.
Okay.
They
Got it.
were supposed to be unified throughout the
Yeah, the
town.
font style and all that. Yep. No, that makes sense. Okay. Just that there is a carve out somewhere in for it. That's what
There
I was.
is,
Yep.
and we have come up with a name for the park dedication for the spring. I don't know if it's been made public knowledge or if I should withhold it for now.
Nope.
So I'm going to withhold that until I get the go-ahead.
I'm not sure either, so let's not.
Let's
Let's hold that off.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I do. I offer teasers.
Stay tuned.
Have you not seen the recreation department's commission's webpage? I'll put little teasers up. And everybody's like, wait, tell me now. So yes, no, I'm building anticipation.
So, my next question is to Rec and to Brian, probably can chime in. Is all of your material and equipment now at the town hall?
The majority of it is. I think some of it is in storage sheds in the parks. And I don't know if there's anything that's in Glenn's storage.
I don't believe so.
I don't think so. I think everything is there. We're taking up a good 3/4 of the basement. Sorry. Foosball table is the smallest. Everything else is really large. And I will, at one point, there's a dock sitting in Brian's office, and I will be installed in the desk downstairs as soon as that gets all set up. So that'll give me a location to work with people
Downstairs?
in the basement. There's a desk.
Do you have a location, Brian?
Where the EMD used to have
Yeah.
a desk set up, we're going to convert that into a workspace for Bretta.
Okay,
The phone's already been migrated to that location,
yep.
and to her point, we just need to set up the dock so that her laptop connects and prints.
So, I mean, I've gone through there and it's kind of congested.
Yes.
It has not been, I think the three of you need to have a meeting with the town clerk and talk about how you're going to handle elections if we set that up permanently as a rec department space. We need to have a plan for your election process. So the three of you and the town clerk need to schedule that meeting, and if the decision is that the rec will set up a permanent space down there, then we'll finalize the rest of that work to set it up appropriately.
Okay.
Thank you. And I did have a question. You had mentioned level funding for the, general operation. But you discussed about, future, park upgrades, and all that. Is that all through capital?
Much of it has already been started through capital, and we're waiting. Our quotes were pre-pandemic, and prices have gone up. So we're waiting to find out what the new costs will be in availability and time scheduling
Okay.
for bringing in contractors to work on the parks, to re-ground, dig out and re-ground the playground at Zelinski, for the pouring of the concrete for an ADA accessible path.
That was one of my, looking at parks maintenance line, that we've only expended a few $100s, and I'm sure that's because of timing and
Yes.
getting everything done. But looking at that dollar amount, as we improve each park going forward, that I'm assuming there's also the ongoing maintenance of that park that will roll away from capital and into operating to make sure that those stay up. Okay.
Yes, that's exactly it.
All right. I just wanted to
Thank you.
double check on that.
Yes.
But currently, you're satisfied? You think the 25,000 that's there will be enough to maintain everything for the next fiscal year?
For the next fiscal year, yes.
Okay.
We'll see, because once the mulch goes in, there's usually a year or two where you can wait for it. Glenn hasn't foreseen any additional maintenance costs. We're taking things in bits and pieces right now because of the need to contract with other contractors, basically coming in to do the work, rather than, as originally planned, it was thought that the highway department could do that when originally we went with the capital requests.
Yeah.
So now we're backing up and we're trying to space things out, especially because contractors have been incredibly busy and their availability has been tight.
Yeah.
So it's slowing things down a little bit.
All right. That's all I have.
Brenda, just to confirm, no capital requests from you guys?
Not this year, we're still working on what we have.
Okay. Capital will take that.
We're working with what we had. We're going to try to working with the capital requests that are already in, getting a couple of those lined up and going. And so there's no new requests for this year. getting
only-
our ducks in a row. Moving forward.
Only question or comment is, and it looks like it, but I'm assuming the capacity in the salary and wage budget to encompass the step increase without an increase in the budget?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions?
None?
Okay. Thank you, Bretta.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll look forward to the narrative. You can get that whenever the group gets that to Brian. We'll get a copy.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the list is Memorial Day and seasonal celebrations.
We're submitting a level funded request. The budget adjustment you approved last year was sufficient to cover our needs, so we'll hold at that position for this year.
No questions or concerns?
I have no concern.
Okay. Did I jump over historical or did we hit that in a prior?
I think we skipped over.
Okay. I didn't see it. I just want to make sure. Historical Commission, it looks level funded. Any questions or concerns?
None.
Okay. And that wraps the budget review for tonight.
Correct.
Next item for the joint meeting is the review of the special town meeting warrant.
So I apologize for getting that out to you all this afternoon. The only change that you all made from my notes last week was the addition of, I'm calling it Article 2, and it was just a change to the cemetery budget. You had all discussed wanting to ask the voters about a change to the FY22 operating budget. I believe the amount was $10,000, and that was to allow the software installation that we talked about, as well as the gravestone restoration project. So the new Article 2 would amend the FY22 general operating budget, so it represents the entire, it would have been Article 5 back at annual town meeting, so it shows all the different sections of the government budget. It specifically calls out Public Works on line 3, proposes amending it by $10,000, and then gives you a new total omnibus budget for Article 5. And then in the descriptor, I specifically call out that it's the sum of $10,000 from free cash, specifically for cemetery department operating maintenance, and we describe the addition of the software and the gravestone project that you want to see done.
Other than that, I think we have two of the planning board zoning articles that we're waiting on feedback from the planning board for. The board is, that we discussed last meeting. So those are kind of TBD if they'll change or be removed from the overall warrant. And the discussion around the concerns that were raised around Highland Ave. So we're still waiting to finalize that one.
Should have all that for you for the next meeting.
Yep. That being said, does the FinCom want to vote to support any, some, or none of the warrant articles at this meeting, next meeting? I'm probably getting close to hopefully finalizing it in the next, by sometime early February at the latest, and get it out for a March timeline is what we were talking about last week, I believe. So, no.
I guess my question would be is, I'm just kind of scrolling through it real quick here. Does the FinCom usually weigh in on zoning stuff? We don't, right?
No.
I think traditionally, non-financials have just not weighed in, right?
Would you gentlemen like to vote tonight, or would you like to wait till the 24th for our next meeting, or does anybody want some more time to look it over?
I'm okay with it. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay with
Yeah.
recommending it as it is.
Is that your motion?
Yes.
Do I have a second?
Oh, I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And just for clarity, that's just for the financial articles, so we'll mark them accordingly, and the rest will leave. Takes no action or something, I believe, is some language we
Yeah.
normally
Or no,
adopt.
Yeah, no.
No position or something?
Position, I
Yeah.
think it
Okay.
is.
All right, we'll update the warrant accordingly for next meeting.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on the STM warrant from any of us?
Not until we get the
Nope.
feedback.
Okay, so we'll look to hopefully get that a lot closer next meeting, and then we'll go from there. Anything else FinCom has for us? Anything else we have for FinCom?
Nope.
Okay. With that, I'll make a motion to adjourn the joint meeting with Finance Committee and continue the Select Board meeting at 8:11 PM.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I think I got a majority at least.
It was
Maybe I just couldn't
unanimous.
hear it.
We thought maybe you wanted to stay longer. And, you know,
Yeah, I mean, you're welcome to stay as long as
Yeah.
you like. Thank you all. We'll see you on the 24th. Same place, same time. So going back to where we left off, discussion of the former International Paper Mill RFP draft. Mariah, you want to come back up? Let me pull that back up. So Bill, if you don't mind, I'll let you take it, and then there's a few other things that I was thinking of too. You were talking about I think the very first page, right, about the riverbank.
The subdividing of the undeveloped portions of the parcel for riverbank protection. And I just, my gut feeling was that it's something that we haven't addressed and talked about in relationship to the RFP, and it is something that down the road we are going to have to make some type of decision on how to pay for that we're going to have to pay for revitalizing the riverbank, and what does that entail? To what extent are we going to go with that? And I know offhand, right now it's a totally overgrown area that you can't gain any access to. We've talked about, and there's been considerable amount of dumping in that area as well, in the river and along the bank. So all those issues kind of seem to need to be addressed in a way that we can, moving forward, when we get a developer, that at least we've talked and had a discussion about it and a plan on how to move forward so that everything is cohesive. And other than that, that's the only reason why I bring it up. As it's addressed in the RFP, I don't see that any changes need to be made to it, except that are we going to require the developer to do any of that work? And if that's a no, then we don't need to address that anymore. Then it's on us.
Go ahead.
Well, I was
You
just
had-
going to follow up. So, Mariah, you had put a thing on there saying, should we change this to is considering, as opposed to we intend to? And part of my response to that is hinged on, and I don't have the map in front of me, the parcel that we are looking to work with through the RFP, does it include any of the riverbank, or are we stopping it short of that and keeping a sliver along the bank, and then to the large parcel of, 42 acres in the back? So are we breaking it out in that aspect where we will still maintain control of the entire riverbank that encompasses that 6 acre or approximate, plus or minus 6 acre parcel?
That's what this question is.
If I'm not mistaken, the 49-acre parcel has more riverbank than the 6-acre
Yes.
developable area. So I had the same question. Are we talking about the first 6-acre riverbank, or the bulk of the property we don't believe is developable for this use bank?
Right.
And maybe backing up to kind of what you first said, I had a couple thoughts. One was, I think maybe considering, or in consultation is not the word I'm looking for, but something in working with the developer, in what portion of the parcel they want to develop. To me, we should almost ask that question. Because where we subdivide that may be more relative to how they're going to use it than necessarily just the strict 6 or that we think is.
Right.
So maybe they only want 5, maybe it's 7, you know, something that's dynamic. And then the balance we would retain, which I think is mostly around the, you know, I guess you call it hillside, riverbank, the old dump site, that kind of area of the parcel. I'm curious, when you asked that question, were you thinking the riverbank and the developed area, the currently developed area would
Well,
be the developers, or would we retain
I
as well?
actually hadn't thought about it. I was thinking of holistically the bank period.
Okay.
Although it's in a developed area. But I would think that any developer coming in and looking to develop the property would also be concerned about the immediate area of the bank and how they can use that in their making it a cohesive design. And so I would suspect that they would want to develop that area. And when we talk about using that area for parking and bicycling and benches for people to be able to sit and see the river, right now you can't do any of that with the growth and the issues that would have to be addressed. So I would not have a problem going with just that immediate area. And then we address those areas of the bank that are beyond the design.
One thought I have is, could you have as a minimum requirement that the developer, let me start over, I'm sorry. If the developer was able to keep those 6 acres and they kept what was along the riverbank, along the developed area, could you have a minimum requirement that said that that section must remain accessible to the public, and that they would be responsible for, I don't know what language you use, but rehabilitating that section of the riverbank, and that we would have some kind of, I think what you were alluding to, Jake, some kind of an agreement that it's open to the public and there's kind of a partnership between the town and the developer to make the riverbank an accessible place that people can visit. I know Brian and I had talked to another developer who had done that in the Springfield area, and I believe that the developer owned that section but was working with the town to put in a river walk, and I actually visited, and they're still working on it, but there's a river walk, there's different historical elements along the way that they kind of kept. And the developer was happy to work with the town to do that. And I don't know the legal language that they put in to make that happen.
So my thoughts on just that part in particular is, I would like to see that parcel be owned and operated by whatever developer wants to come in. So we're talking about the riverbank that runs up through the developed part, so that it can not only be cohesive with the rest of the style of what they're proposing, but I also question, and it's been several years since I've looked at the open space plan, and how does the open space plan, as I know there's components of the open space plan that address public access to waterways and usage of that. So is there a way we can refer back to our open space plan, make sure that it references that, and then the town and the developer work in conjunction as a partnership to make sure that the entire riverbank is maintained, that is clean of debris, that allows for access, but we put some constraints on we're not asking them to put up anything large, crazy there, just to allow for access, and that it's clean of debris and contaminants, and that we're not disturbing the river in any way.
I was thinking accessibility and maintenance.
Yeah, and that's really all I was thinking as well. And on our part, the additional frontage that is owned by the town, that'll be retained by the town, that we work in conjunction doing the same thing. So that it's a longer access other than just the 6 acres.
Yeah.
So that was my part in that. I still think it would say intends, and is there a way that we can address sort of a partnership on what the requirements would be for maintaining that stretch of land?
Okay. And I assume, and I just pulled up a zoning map as well, just to follow it again, but I assume the 6-acre estimate is around where the zoning change is, right? Because that kind of aligns with where the topography change is. Is that
Yeah.
correct in my recollection? Okay. So maybe that doesn't need to be any different. Maybe it is to be pretty clear around that 6 acres. No, I'm okay with that.
Yep.
And you've done such a wonderful job at acquiring and finding grants for the town. maybe out there is, some improvement to doing a riverbank.
I think, I'm just going to put this out there, my take is the rural residential portion that we would retain of that parcel. I'm not sure what, if anything, how much we could even do. I think there's so many unknowns there,
Right,
and
right.
and the topography and all of that.
Right.
I think we, to what you were saying, should retain accessibility to get to it via this parcel if we've conveyed it.
Right.
I would definitely agree in the burden and responsibility of maintaining and keeping accessibles on the new owner
Yep.
Yeah.
for the portion conveyed.
Yeah. I agree.
Can I say that back to you so you can all tell me if I captured that correctly?
Sure.
So we intend to subdivide this, and the town would like to retain the rural residential section, so the parcel except for the 6 developed acres. And we would like to keep access to the section that we would be keeping through some kind of an easement or something like that. But the developer would be responsible for the maintenance and keeping the accessibility there. Did I capture that?
Accessibility of the riverbank in their parcel,
Yes.
their parcel specifically,
Yep.
but also providing some accessibility. And maybe that's a good point. Maybe it's through a right-of-way or something. I think it depends on their design. Their design should have some way that we can then get through that parcel and access ours. If they have some cul-de-sac or some roadway, it may just be a matter of that comes close to the end of the parcel and we have an ability to cross the rest of that parcel to go to ours. Don't know what we're going to do with it or how we're going to do it.
Right.
We've got to get there somehow. Otherwise
Right.
it becomes
Right.
completely locked, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. We
So-
can't have it locked.
Right. I don't think my expectation is that they build the road or keep a road open to the edge of the property, but there needs to be a method that we could develop it later or get to it later.
So that being said, would you all like to see some kind of consideration, whether it's in a minimum requirement or on the rubric, for improvements made to the riverbank? I know that in one of the, or maybe both of the proposals, or the responses that you received to the RFI, they included a river walk or something along the lines of that. It doesn't have to be a river walk, but would you like to see some kind of improvements made there where the public or tenants of the building can then access it?
I would. Yes.
I would. I don't know if I want to say river access, but accessibility to the river bank. Like if it's
Riverbank.
just benches and viewing, that's okay with me,
Right.
as opposed to
Right.
per se river
Right.
access, because I know that can
Right.
be more complex.
Yeah. I was a little concerned.
Because I think that's what your look
Yeah.
was, right?
you read that.
Was I
look
reading
of-
that through the mask?
You were absolutely reading that correctly.
I don't want to push that on a developer, but
Correct,
Right.
and there's a lot more that is that encompasses that idea of river access and the legalities and liabilities that come with that. So it really, in my mind, it's just asking the developer to be able to have open space that is clear of debris, that's maintained for overgrowth and vegetation, so that somebody could literally just walk through the grass and view. And that's really so it's not much more than brush clearing and maintenance of mowing, that type of stuff. If there's, and that's maybe where the enhancement of advantageous to highly advantageous is if somebody comes in with not just a clearing of brush, but they have a plan for a walkway and some benches and,
Right.
they want to go above and beyond to incorporate that into their plan. Maybe that's somebody who is highly advantageous. So,
I can see that use, regardless of the use, I can see that value.
yeah,
So, yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
And do we want to be clear that that would need to stay open to the public? Some kind of access, whether it's just visual or
I think it
down to the water?
Yeah, and so
it needs to be. I think to be the highly advantageous, it needs to be, right?
Yes.
Needs to be community access as opposed to,
Right.
I don't know, tenant access maybe? I don't know what you thought.
I think so, because if the public has to have a right to access that portion of it to get to the next portion of it, if it turns into a walkable trail or a place to bicycle through. So you have to have some degree of access, permanent access to that, to that. But
I wouldn't put it as a minimum requirement.
I was thinking it was highly advantageous.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah.
it, to me, it would be highly advantageous if somebody wanted to do that, but if a developer said that they were, fine with just giving a proposal that said, as the owners, we want to restrict, use of the land to our tenants, whether it be commercial, industrial, or residential,
Yeah.
it would be their property and their right to give that proposal. But I think that would, in my mind, rank lower than somebody that says, we will develop it for public use and public access.
So if I'm thinking about the structure of the rubric, would you want to see not advantageous be no public access, not much in terms of improvements to the riverbank, and then advantageous be no public access but improvements to the riverbank, and then highly advantageous would be full public access and like large improvements to the riverbank, like a river walk or something like that?
I think so. I guess I want to ask the question, do we have to have matching criteria in every level? Like if we talk about public access to the riverbank, it highly advantageous with development, et cetera. I think about something like over in Turner's Falls along the Connecticut River and Unity
That-
Park.
and that's
That
what I
kind
think
of,
of too.
you've got
Yeah.
a walking path, you've got nicely groomed, you've got benches, you've got all these kind of features and access to the community. If that's highly advantageous, do we have to have an advantageous version, or can we just have a not advantageous that we retain, you maintain the riverbank and keep it nice and maintained, and that's it. And you don't have to have the in-betweens. I don't know. I'm asking the question.
So that's the similar point that I was saying earlier, is you
Boxing yourself in, right?
well, no, I like that idea of it's one or the other, and we don't have to break it down to the minutia of 4 different categories. We really are saying you're either granting access to the public through your proposal, or you're at a minimum maintaining. And so you just model the two of them with the exact same language, so that you are effectively keeping the same format, the same rubric, but you're either saying they're either proposing to just maintain without access or maintain with access. And those are the two.
And improvement.
Yes, and so those are the two. So this is your proposal or this, and
And
it's
if you
either-
offer something in between, we can grade you in the middle when we read it, I guess is what I keep thinking. And trying to put a middle grade in there and define it exactly feels a little too boxing us into to deciding before we've even seen it that this may or may not be better than that. I guess that's my challenge. I don't know.
So I want to.
So Mariah, you said you had saw some language that a developer had used for that same kind of thing?
For the categories or for the Riverwalk?
For the Riverwalk, you just briefly mentioned that,
I visited a developer or development that had a Riverwalk, and
Yeah.
they mentioned that it was a partnership. I don't know what the
Oh, okay.
language was that they
Okay,
used to
okay.
do that. I can. They might respond to this, so I'm not sure. Can we ask them for that? I mean, I guess it's public information.
It's a public procurement, so
Yeah.
we can get a copy.
Okay, I can try to reach out. I think.
We can contact the town and ask them
Yeah.
for a copy. Yeah.
I don't know if that was included in the procurement or if that
Okay.
was something that they just decided to do.
right.
You know, I think that's one of those things that may not have been put into words at the time that they signed everything. It could have just been a friendly agreement.
Yep. No, I was just wondering that, you know, if there's language out there, it may aid or help us in figuring out what our language is or shouldn't be.
Yeah, I think it's worth asking the question. Brian, do you have thoughts on Scott's idea of having two of the, having two categories be the same description? So that you're effectively only grading it. Am I interpreting that right? It's like a binary kind of you met it or you didn't?
Correct.
Or potentially cutting down to 3 options
In that one category?
in any category or all the categories?
That was going to be my follow-up question is, can we, when we create the rubric, is it acceptable, because I know there's a lot of, constraints with formatting, to have some of the criteria only be 3?
Well, in the current layout, if you go with the outline version of the rubric that's currently being proposed, I don't see any reason why operationally you couldn't. You would just change the point allocation or however you're going to structure the grading system under the outline.
Yep.
If you put it back into a traditional rubric, it may feel like something's missing. But there may be an example out there where we could find to see how they approach that, because I can't believe that
Well-
we'd be the first community trying to deal with that. We either want it or either you included it and that's advantageous, or you didn't include it and therefore we're ranking that lower, less like a scale. Right?
So if I'm following what you're talking about, though, you're talking about getting this back into like a graded matrix, right? Where you're putting a numeric grading to each of these. That's what you're saying, like.
I'm actually saying from what I think I hear the 4 of you talking about, it's probably easier to accomplish in the current outline version as opposed to the
Table.
typical graded rubric.
Matrix.
The matrix, correct.
I guess, and this is where my mind, I challenge that, like the criteria that we are putting, like if you pick any one thing, let's just say, housing. If we have 4 criteria, it's either, not all the way to highly. To me, that's 0 to 3, or it's 1 to 5, or some grading, right? If we only list a not advantageous and a highly advantageous, there's still a 0 to 3 or a 1 to 5. It's discretion if you fell at 2. It just isn't defined in the list what 2 is exactly, right?
I mean,
If it's 0 to 3, you have a 1 and a 3 defined. They got halfway there. They got a 2, right? I mean,
just to be clear, you're using a range.
yeah.
And so I think in some ways we were suggesting a point total per category. So if it fell into that particular space on the matrix, it would have a defined quantity assigned to it. If you wanted more discretion in terms of a range, I don't think there's a reason you can't do that. But would you want that applied to all of the graded categories, or we just have to be clear to whomever is reading this, interpreting it, that one category is a range that may have some more subjectivity to it versus another one that has a defined value.
Okay, I follow what you're saying now.
Yeah, so I was not thinking
Yeah,
of it as a
all right.
range. When I was thinking of making less categories, basically saying it's still advantageous to have it maintained, and then it's highly advantageous to have it maintained, upgraded, and accessible to the public. And those are the two that we use. So when you're looking at, that category, it would be specific to riverbank and access, and there would only be two choices, highly advantageous and advantageous. You either met that or you didn't. And
So it'd actually be 3 because it'd be a not, right? Because you didn't even meet the minimum. You didn't
No.
provide access.
Well, I think
maintain and
anytime we
advantageous.
talk about minimum requirements, in my mind, if there's a minimum requirement, when we open that, before we get into any rubric, we see whether or not it has the minimum requirements. If there is no piece in there about a minimum, we just take that proposal and move it off to the side, and it didn't meet the minimum. We don't have to
Right.
spend
Okay, I see what you're saying.
45 minutes going through all of the documents to say, how's the rest of the proposal? If we set a minimum to say we must see this, and they are not willing to add that to their proposal didn't meet the minimum, we move on to the next one.
Would
follow.
reducing all of the categories to 3 options satisfy this? Because I'm thinking, even if you have your minimum requirement is about riverbank access. There must be some version of that. Your not advantageous might be that there is minimal effort and thought put into that. It's in there. You met the requirement of including it. But there's not a lot of thought put in. You said, I'm going to put 2 benches by the riverbank. I'm going to remove the invasive species, but that's it. Your advantageous might be, we're going to do lots of cleanup along the river. We're going to plant some native species. We're going to add lots of benches. And then your highly advantageous is a full river walk with, I don't even know, signage along the way. Would having it be 3 rather than 4 make it feel a little bit less, conceptual?
I think 3 rather than 4 makes a lot of sense for almost all categories.
I
personally.
agree. So I struggle with the 4 categories, and
I
I
do
thought
too.
we were tied to it, but I hadn't thought of the fact that it's a real estate procurement.
Right.
So we're not. So I think, if you'd like, I would be happy to go through this
Sure you would.
and call it down to 3 options per category. It might not solve all of your problems, but it might make it a little bit easier to grasp that, because I understand what you're saying about you're trying to break it down by the minutia. I can also, now that I got that feedback, I can go through and take out, I tried to be as specific as possible. I can take out some of that specific language so that it's a little bit more, you're talking more about whether things are cohesive and whether they are compatible, and less percentages and numbers. Because I do think that my fear is that by going too broad, you open it up for a developer to say, well, why did they get a 4 and I got a 0 or a 2, And I don't think you want to be in the situation where your only answer to that is, well, I didn't like that.
No, I think there has to be
I
some
get-
backup. Yeah, absolutely, there has to be some objective backup to how they were graded. But also, I think it's very clear that we have the right to offer to anyone, and it doesn't matter. It clearly states that we can offer it to anybody. We could offer it to nobody. We can pull the whole thing. We could. I always envisioned when we're grading these and we're looking and we're reviewing all of them, that there's a range that, we want to take the top, I don't know, I'm going to be advantageous and say, or optimistic and say that there's, 6 proposals, and we want to take the top 50%, and review those. And we could, so we don't have to say that the top score is the one, it's not like a standard procurement where we're offering it to the highest
It's not a
bidder.
bid, yeah.
This is,
Right.
So the top score doesn't automatically get. It just means that we really like their proposal, and we wanted to discuss that further and see if that's the final one. So I'm not too worried.
I think I need to get my mindset, if I may, out of that, of the idea of that, like, what the rubric defines as the highest is where we're going to end up.
Right.
And more of, it's supposed to guide us to the right ones, and if it doesn't, we can toss it out and go a different path. Like, we have
Right.
that ability
Right.
in this, and I think that's where I'm, again, getting hung up with not acceptable and all of those things, is that I'm concerned the best proposal won't rank maybe because we couldn't foresee every option that's out there.
It feels
and that's-
binding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, oh, go ahead.
No,
But
that's fine.
I'm
I
kind
wanna-
of thinking, I like, at least what I'm hearing, I like the idea of maybe not advantageous, advantageous, and highly advantageous, and that's it.
Yes.
Because if you met the minimum, not acceptable kind of doesn't apply in my mind.
Yep.
Right.
The not acceptable shouldn't be on the table.
I think the not acceptable is.
The not
people that-
great is there. The I don't like it better than anything else I could imagine.
Yep.
But it's at least the minimum, right? Yeah.
Right.
So I'm
Okay.
sure you'd love to redo it, but as Scott said, but I think I'm leaning that way if you both are.
I am.
Okay. If that's the direction you want me to go, I can go through, and rather than you all, well, I guess if you have things that are not related to the formatting of this that you want to offer as feedback this week, you can. Otherwise, I'll work on this and I'll resend it out to you this week, and then you can all review it, over the next week and a half, 2 weeks. Get me any feedback you have, and I can incorporate that for another draft.
Okay.
I do have, I think, 2 more questions that I thought of when I was sitting back there. One of them plays into what you just brought up, which is how you want to incorporate interviews if you choose to have any. Right now, we have that in the rubric, but I don't know. This was a holdover from the last RFP that I found in here, but I don't know that you would want to wait to score these until you had presentations. I think you would want to score them and then potentially call people back for presentations if you wanted more information.
Yeah.
That makes more sense to me.
That
Yeah.
makes more
Okay.
sense to me.
So it wouldn't be in the rubric. It might
Right.
help define our final decision, but it's not in the initial
Yeah.
Right.
grading.
Okay, so would you like me to just have, not in the rubric, but in another part, just a paragraph that says something like, the select board, or at the select board's discretion, they may ask
Yeah.
people to come for a presentation or site visit, and leave it at something like that?
Yeah, to further detail portions of the proposal or the proposal overall, something like that, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I can do that. And then page 14. I had included job information as one of the things in the rubric, and I think if we're moving in the less prescriptive direction in the rubric overall, then maybe I take out some of the numbers. I tried to make it like if you create 30 or more long-term jobs, you get X amount, and I think we're moving away from that. But one of the pieces of language that I found in an example RFP was low employment uses such as self-storage or warehousing are generally discouraged, and I don't know how you all feel about that.
What was it
Say that
again? I'm
again?
sorry.
What?
Could you say that again?
Oh,
I think I
sorry,
missed that.
yeah.
Sorry.
Low employment uses such as self-storage or warehousing are generally discouraged.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think we need more storage.
I mean, I don't envision a self-storage site there, but at the end of the day, something, I don't know.
And discouraging it is not banning it, to be clear. I think you could express that you would
maybe
rather.
for me, warehousing, I just think of most industrial or commercial, even some commercial requires some warehousing. I can understand, I think, the idea of, and I'm not picking on anyone, but an Amazon warehouse as its own standalone thing is what that's getting at. I don't have a concern about warehousing that's affiliated with something else going on there,
I think they're referring to self-storage.
like just
So it's,
standalone warehouses
just standalone,
or
standalone self-storage, like, like we already have in town.
Yeah.
Or I imagine kind of warehousing that is not an active business, but is just storage
Just a warehouse.
for a
It's just a
business or
warehouse, yeah.
something like
yeah,
that.
that's kind of what I
And
meant.
so they
like
have
just,
no
just
employee,
warehouse.
it's not creating any employment, it's just a
Right.
building that's
Right.
unmanned and.
Right.
Yeah.
Could add a line
I-
that clarifies that, if that was something the three of you were interested in.
Well, I think, so to your original point, I think it's advantageous to, if you're going to, in any proposal, even residential as part of it, it creates jobs because you're looking for property management and, you know, all of that long term. So finding an open way, a subjective way of saying we encourage the maximum number of long-term, you know, employment in some capacity. But I agree that putting the numbers of 20 to 29 and 30 and above, it seems far too restrictive to try and put numbers on the number of jobs that somebody's trying to create in order to get a highly advantageous, because they could be creating 30 jobs that really are not necessary based on what they're trying to propose.
Can we be subjective instead of quantitative on this and not say 30 or more or whatever, but say a large number of and not define large, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, we
that's
don't
just what
have
I'm
to-
saying. Like,
yeah.
I feel like we're getting hung up, and at least myself, that there's exact numbers in here that well, you had 29, you didn't make it, you have 30, you got it, you know. Instead saying, you know, that creates a large number of.
Yep.
Now, someone can ask, what's a large number? Well, it depends on what you're doing.
So I think the answer to that is yes, you can do it. To Mariah's earlier counsel, the idea is trying to be as specific as possible so that you can try to tease out the differences between 2 or 3 similar proposals and find which is more advantageous without boxing you in. So you all are trying to walk that line. I think the other piece to remember is that anything that's put forward in the proposal that you have now deemed as highly advantageous and therefore is a proposal that you want to go to that next step, awarding it and drafting a development agreement with, you can put these requirements that came forward to you in the proposal into that development agreement. So 60% of the overall project will be done within 5 years, and in that first phase, these benchmarks have to be met. So all those things that you've been talking about over the last few months, as you've been working on this draft, you can take those things that come forward to you with their concrete numbers and their projections and put that into your development agreement and keep those as benchmarks, so it keeps the town at the table with them, making sure that the project is moving forward with some, I mean, we understand things still happen, but at least there's some triggers to keep this project moving as opposed to you approve something and then nothing happened.
I have example
guess-
language if you'd like to hear different and alternate to the numbers that were in there.
I would, but I think what you just said maybe got me thinking more. My issue is it's relative. And to your point, if we have 6 proposals, and be optimistic, we have 6, what is a large amount of jobs or some jobs is relative to the proposals we get. It's abstract to guess a number today and say 30 is that number.
Correct.
We might get proposals that make, 10 to 40. We might get proposals that generate 50 to 100. Without that context, because we don't have them yet, I feel like the numbers become maybe less conducive to the reality we're going to review, and that's where I'm struggling.
Yeah,
Agreed.
Yeah,
Go-
and I
if
don't.
you want to read that, maybe that helps.
Yeah, and I want to be clear. This was a first draft that I put numbers into, and I absolutely expected this kind of conversation. So
Yeah, it's absolutely not meant to be a critique of what you presented. You gave us something to develop the
Right.
thoughts and the questions to get to where we want to get to.
We wouldn't
So,
be here to discuss
Yeah, we
it.
wouldn't know. We don't know what we don't know to ask, and
Yeah.
this is this.
So this is, again, pulled from an example that a colleague sent me that I think is moving more in the direction you're all wanting to go. And they have as highly advantageous a proposal that maximizes new full-time employment opportunities with advancement, livable wages, and benefits to the site, and any other employment-related functions such as training opportunities, fills a critical market gap or complements a key market cluster in the local economy.
that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was like,
Yes.
Thank you,
change it
Walter
to that.
Ramsey.
It's that.
Do they have oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's that language about maximizes, you know, and if you pulled that out, I'm sure there's another one that is, not highly that.
Yeah, their
just sort of-
advantageous one is offers at least some new employment opportunity.
perfect,
Yeah. Then it
perfect.
goes,
And
yeah.
that's exactly what we're looking for. It's something about the qualitative.
Okay.
Yeah. Our
Yeah.
friends in Montague are very good at wordsmithing.
So I would say, I think if I'm summarizing what we've said about almost everything in here, getting it down to 3 is making more qualitative references like that to the things that we feel are advantageous and are not, levels of advantageousness. It's not really a word. I made it up today. We'll use it in there.
We got it.
and really do more of that and less of numeric
Yeah.
measurement,
Yes.
right? You nailed it with that one. So I think.
Well, Montague nailed it.
Yeah, Montague did a great job with that.
Thank you, Montague.
Don't ever reinvent the wheel. So you take credit for finding it.
People have been doing this for a long time. There's no need to redo it.
Right. Right.
Okay, I think that's most of the big questions.
I had a couple. You asked, do we want to put anything about taxable or payment in lieu of
Yes,
taxes?
that was the other one.
yes.
So
Yep.
that's a question I wanted us to at least
Yes.
talk about, if not answer.
Yes.
I think yes, but I don't know exactly how we say it. But something that, generically puts it back on the tax rolls. And the method, we'll determine, right? Whether there's a pilot or,
Right.
something of that sort.
And that was also language that I took from Montague's RFP,
Okay.
was about the payment in lieu of taxes if they're a non-taxable entity. I am not super familiar with how those function in detail, but Brian and I can try to find more information on that for the next meeting if you'd like.
We've done one that I
Okay.
recall around solar.
Yep.
And that's the only one that I'm familiar with in general. But I think I at least understand the differences. But in both cases, they end up with tax income,
Right.
which is the idea, right? So at least for me, my board members here, but something that prescribes it puts tax money in is important.
Yeah. And that was the one thing I wrote down that I wanted to circle back to. Was
Taxes.
the question mark saying. And it's in response to the conversation we had last week, where it was
Absolutely.
brought up about what if a nonprofit were the most advantageous to the town.
Yep.
And we've cited several times that we want to get this blighted property back onto the tax rolls. And, so working in a way to ensure that happens. So to
Agreed.
address that concern that was brought up last week, to work that language in as a minimum requirement, that it will be a taxable property regardless of your not-for-profit status.
Right.
Right. And I think, sometimes you hear about TIFs and other things. Our
Yeah.
tax rate is very advantageous already, so I don't think that shouldn't be a sticking point to me. You asked about information on housing cap. I think we already covered that enough. Or was that more specific to something else?
That was specific to a conversation that Brian and I had had about, right now you have a limit on how many units of housing can be built in town. And
With zoning?
right.
from last week,
And I believe we looked it up and we thought that it expired this coming year, but it actually expired, I think, in 2024, we said? Or the end of 2023?
Phased growth by law expires, I believe, December 31st of '23.
Okay. I think you and I, and maybe not everyone else, has talked about, does a 40B process supersede that?
And that was the question. that we
Does it
were
have the
waiting back
ability to supersede that?
on. My understanding is yes.
Okay.
But we were waiting for a firm answer from council.
Okay. So I think because it is very limiting, the phased growth is very limiting and wouldn't maybe be conducive to something that had any kind of significant mixed residential use probably. So we would probably be considering something 40B or related.
So
to
this
that
goes
point.
back to that language of inserting
Yep.
that the
Supporting a friendly,
Friendly.
supporting a friendly agreed upon 40B.
Would you like me to include that language? At least in the draft form?
I think to keep that conversation going, yes.
yeah, I think something that says if the mixed use proposal included residential that exceeded the phased growth limitations, we would consider a friendly 40B if your proposal was selected. I mean, it's all about whether we thought it was right anyway.
Right,
So
right.
it's only friendly if we like it, right?
Right.
Correct.
I mean, that's blunt, but
Right.
so the language doesn't worry me when we're making the
Right.
decision whether we want to even go there.
Right.
So
Okay.
price, I think we've been pretty consistent in our discussions that price doesn't really rank very high, if anywhere, on this.
Would
In
you like
terms of
have a
property
dollar
price?
as your floor rather than $0 so that, to have it be a financial transaction?
Does it
When you
need to be
say-
$1 for any
legality of
reason?
it.
Say price, what do you mean?
usually
by
For the
Consideration.
for whoever's going to acquire the property, what
Yeah.
do they have to pay to get the property
To
from
get
us?
the property?
Are they buying it from us, basically?
Right.
I mean,
We'll
if
have
it-
a sealed price proposal form that they will turn in,
Yeah.
and that will come in addition to a sealed envelope to your binder that you'll receive. So they could obviously put whatever dollar amount. So Mariah's question is there a minimum threshold on that form?
I mean, if there's a requirement to put a minimum amount rather than zero, just $1. I mean, I think it's very, as far as my stance is, I'm looking at what the developer brings to the table for the town of Irving and that property. Far and above over how much they're willing to pay for the property.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I suppose that any developer would not be in this game if they weren't capable of didn't have the income or the finances to go through a project like what we're talking about. So money probably isn't an issue, but I kind of think back when in Montague when people took property for $1 and then didn't do anything with it.
Yeah, and so I guess I want to, I'll if I can comment on that.
Go ahead.
The entire RFP process it won't allow for somebody to come in and take the property for $1 and then do nothing with it. That's why we're doing the RFP. So we're putting the threshold of keeping us at the table to ensure that the property does move forward into a developed property and is being utilized again. I guess the minimum to me is not relevant. Now, don't get me wrong. If somebody were to come in with very similar developments, and we liked both of them, and one of them says, I will pay you $500,000 for the property and still do the same thing that person's going to pay you $1 for, I think you know where my stance is going to be on which one we're going to go with. Because, we are still property owners that are looking, we have to look out the best interest for the town.
Right.
So if in the rubric, I don't know if we can capture that, or if that's just part of our end result, that we are comparing and contrasting multiple proposals, and the financial consideration is a piece of that.
Can we include that in the rubric as a
It comes as a separate
consideration?
document, so I'm not sure how that
It comes as a separate document because you're focusing on the programmatic goals.
first.
Yeah,
So I think just leaving
but I don't
it-
think it should be in the rubric because I agree with you. The biggest determination is what are you going to do and how does that affect the tax base and the development of the town and that property? It isn't about the monetary transaction this year, next year.
right.
It's the long term, right? So to me, it's the long vision. It's not the short term financial engagement. And
Yeah, I agree.
I'll just challenge. There's also a comment in here that we're going to sign a lease, not sell. So are we? Which is it?
That may just be holdover language. So my understanding from this is that you're planning to sell the property and not do a long-term land lease.
Okay. I just want to make sure because in the earlier on I noticed that it said a lease. At which point
Do
the
you
price for
know-
the property doesn't apply.
Do you remember where it said that?
I will find it. And I'll
Okay.
go
Yeah, I
back to
remember
find
seeing
it
that and
again.
had that question as well. I think was part of that language, I think Brian's nodding yes, that it was from the senior housing.
It could have
Yeah,
been.
it
I
was.
think there was also somewhere where I could have typed that with the intent that if it was a landlord leasing space to tenants. I don't remember.
No, it's not.
It
It's
was like a
very
land lease?
specific
Yeah,
under
it-
page 6, development agreement. It's the intent to enter into development agreement with a select proposer in 90 days and then lease the land with deed restriction after the benchmarks have been met.
Yeah, we'll just have to clean up that language.
And it's reference to a draft agreement in attachment G.
You
which I don't
said,
think
sorry,
exists.
page 6.
Page 6, development agreement.
Okay. Yeah, I can
to
highlight
lease
that
the
and make
land.
sure.
So I think, and I agree, I think our proposal was to convey the property. We're not
Yes.
looking
Yes.
to. I think the senior housing was a lease, a
Yes, there
potentially
was- there was
99-year
some
lease,
lease
right?
language
Yeah,
talked
yeah.
about.
So,
So in terms of the cost,
the price.
sorry,
It's okay.
I hope there's no more
Same
cost.
thing.
Keep that as either 0 or $1, depending on whether we need to have any money change hands. I don't know what if there is a legal requirement or advantage
I'll
to
double
that.
check with council.
I mean, to me, it's a moot point. If it's just easier to not have to put in the legwork of checking with council and incurring that cost, just set it at $1. And it just means that
The question will be more expensive.
It'll
than
cost
$1.
us more than $1 to
it'll
get
cost
the
us more to call legal and go through all of that. We're spending money to
Okay.
just set it at $1.
Put it-
Or you could say there is no minimum price.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's up to you. $1
Yeah.
fine.
As long as you're clear that you weren't paying them to take this off your hands either.
Right.
You've
All
already
right. Well,
sunk
fine.
enough.
We'll say $1.
yeah, $1,
Sure.
and
fine.
easy enough.
Yep.
Thank you.
Were there others? As I'm just going through the list, make sure I didn't miss any others that I had seen.
I actually just thought of another one. There's a timeline that I put in on page 9 under minimum requirements for site development. This is the timeline for how long their project takes. So the third bullet point down, the second bullet point down is that the successful proposer will be expected to execute. I put land disposition agreement. Is that the right language, Brian?
Yep.
Within 30 days of delivering the agreement, of the delivery of the agreement. And then there's a building permit within 6 months, a certificate of occupancy for at least one phase within 3 years, and all phases of the project must be complete within 10 years. I don't know if that's the right language or numbers, but we should have some kind of outline of what our expectations are in terms of a timeline of completing the project. And I think you can, like, to Brian's point, I think you can negotiate that further when you identify the proposer, but to give them an idea of within 10 years, within 20 years, within 3 years, what they're looking to do.
And that's where, to what Mariah's communicating, that's where we can put those specific benchmarks, especially early in the project, where you retain control of the property until enough of those benchmarks have been hit, and then we transfer control of the property over to the new proposers to try to achieve what Scott was talking about, this idea that the property is not acquired and then set on. We've gotten you to the point where financing's in place, permits are ready to go. The project is 90% a sure thing at that point.
Ready to break ground. kind of.
You're ready, yes. And then we're transferring control of the property. And up until then, your development agreement gives them site access so they can go with their team to do the work that they need to do. They're insuring the property. All of those things are in the development agreement.
And so, looking at these numbers that are in there, they're placeholders in reality, correct? Because when we get,
Right.
you know,
Unless there's something hard in there that you want to stick to, like
Right.
this idea that occupancy is within 3 years.
correct.
If you really want to see activity at that site, I think you may want to create a firm benchmark that you believe strongly in, or they have to come back to you. Maybe there's a fail-safe in there where something goes awry, they need to come back to the select board to seek an amendment to the development agreement.
Right, I guess that's what I'm saying is, in the RFP, it is a placeholder. But when we, to make sure that they are addressing what their proposal is to work within those confines. However, when it comes to developing that agreement,
Right.
then we can work with whoever we chose to say, okay, we want to, based on your proposal, we think it makes more sense to change this, target date or,
They might say that it's going to take us 3.5 years because we have to wait until June to apply for funding or something.
Right, or, we feel that with the size of our, it's going to take us 12 years, based on our timeline, so we have that capacity to change it, but in order to give everybody a level playing field of at least a placeholder for timeframes to put a proposal in there.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. I just wonder.
What page is that again? I keep scrolling and missing it.
Page 9.
Thank you.
Under minimum requirements for site development.
Yep, number 11, it's the red.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
right,
Got it. Oh, I was looking for numbers, not words.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. My only challenge with that is if it's a no go on minimum, and we set a timeline that they exceed, then they're out. As opposed to a preferred timeline
Okay.
versus a minimum timeline.
You could structure it in a preferred, has to contain these minimum categories so that you have a structure that you would at least be willing to consider.
Right.
But
I mean,
there's still
I-
probably a firm somewhere in there that you do.
I don't have a problem with substantial in 5 and complete in 10 or something more generic, but I'm just thinking
is-
about that idea of a minimum. If we say it has to be within this and within that and within that, and it's not realistic for whatever the driver.
My thought is, and I don't have the entire document burned into memory yet.
You don't?
No, I don't. I've got about
sure?
1/40th of it. So is there somewhere that we have the capacity to say, mutually agreed upon changes, and notifying the prospective bidders that maybe not saying all phases of, must be completed, but are preferred and can be amended by mutual agreement?
Well, I was thinking if it's a preferred, then when you get into, we've selected someone and we're hammering out benchmark timelines, that's when we set.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
The
So-
line in the sand.
So instead of saying must, because then we're bound, if we start changing what a must be, and you're right, we're opening up a bid saying, and they're saying it's going to be a 15-year.
Right.
And they don't have the option of working with us because we said it must be 10.
Right.
Especially if we're setting that as a minimum requirement, and that
Right.
language is very, but if it's preferred, and then it can be, we can do those follow-up questions. If we're doing interviews with
Right.
prospective candidates saying, well, you have 15 in here, but we're looking to 10, is that something that you feel you could amend?
I could also change that language to preferred, and I think I put some of this into the rubric. I would have to go double check, but you could also have that be part of your rubric is it's highly advantageous to have all of this done within 8 years, within, I know we're moving away from numbers, but to have substantial completion of all phases within a set amount of time or something. That could be part of how you're grading this because, I understand not wanting to limit who is responding. After all this time, you'd hate to have to turn someone away because it's going to take 2 years longer. But I also think you don't want this project to last 20 years before it's done.
No.
You want to have some kind of a timeline that says we're going to have
I think
jobs
in
in
overall-
5 years.
I was thinking an overall limit, like you have 10, maybe it's not 10, maybe it's 15, but, or it's substantial completion must be within 10. And then we can be a little subjective about what substantial is based on the proposal, but yes, I'd like to not be in senior housing by the time it's done, so.
I think one bit of suggestion that I would offer counter to that is that I think you do want something before substantial completion because I think that then encourages people to phase their projects so that they're not saying, well, yeah, in 10 years we're going to have this whole thing done, whereas another person might come in and they've got phases where they're going to definitely have something done within 2 years, the whole project won't be done. I think it gives you a little bit more urgency than just saying, tell us what you'll get done in 10 years.
I more meant minimum versus rubric. We're saying that the minimum requirement is that you're going to complete it in 10 or you're going to have substantial completion in 10. Rubric would say it's advantageous to have a significant portion done in 3 to 5 or whatever that is,
Okay.
The more you can get done, the sooner the better, right? That's just,
That's the
and
nature of
usable.
it. Yeah.
so.
So would you like me to change that language to preferred and maybe pare it down so that it's less specific?
I like changing it to preferred. I like keeping the breakdown that you have with applying for a building permit within 6 months, the CO within 3 years. That idea of having those benchmarks in that description of minimum requirements, I think just changing the language to preferred allows us to have some flexibility when we're looking at that. If somebody says that the timeline, we cannot do it in 6 months, it's preferred, they can do it in 9. It doesn't make sense that it's a minimum requirement because,
I think that's my thing. I'm okay with the language, but it doesn't belong in minimum if we're going to change it to preferred.
Yeah.
correct.
To
It
me,
needs to
preferred
find
and
it-
minimum doesn't belong
It needs
together.
to find a new home somewhere that says.
I think there is a project timeline piece in there somewhere too,
Yeah.
right? Separate.
Yeah, I can find a new home for that.
Yeah, I'm fine with it as well in the preferred state.
Yeah.
What you have you broke it down? There was one on 28, Brian, that you proposed, or 29. Is this language desired? The town will cooperate with the developer in pursuing any real estate tax exemptions or abatements that are available for the project.
So the question is,
I don't think at the town level, because that doesn't make sense to me. Because we're not, a real estate abatement or exemption at the town level doesn't make sense to me because part of our goal is to put it back on the tax rolls. And, at least in my mind, and, I lost the other half of that. And because we aren't asking for a financial, we're not asking for them to buy the property for some set amount of money that may offset that. You know, it's not like we're selling it for $1 million and then, you know, we'll work with you on a tax, you know, some kind of tax advantage for some period. Does that make sense? Or is that not what you're asking?
sort of, but it's bigger than that. So, and then
I know it's bigger than that. So bigger than that, I'm okay.
Yeah,
In
I'm
town,
not-
I don't think I am.
Right, I'm not encouraging the three of you to consider a TIF for specifically Irving taxes.
Right.
The issue is going to be if a developer is trying to achieve a TIF on the state level, they're going to need to have, there's a whole process that they initiate on the state level. It comes back to the local community, and if the local community authorizes a TIF, it can activate the state level. So there may be other tax financing plans that they need to pursue to make their proposal work. And is the select board willing and or interested in entertaining a request that comes forward that is part of their proposal? So that's the first piece. And then I think the larger part of that is there are other opportunities. We've listed them out in the RFP. We're part of the new market tax credit. We're an opportunity zone. There's certain things that as a community we can leverage and help leverage. I think that speaks to the partnership that we're trying to maintain with whatever developer comes forward. So yes, we're not personally trying to help redevelop this property once it transitions into those private hands, but you've all taken such a significant role in this property over the last 2 decades. I think it would be appropriate to at least consider what's our ongoing relationship and how much are we willing to put on the table to assist. I'm certainly not recommending that the town appropriate more funds towards this project. But we do need to at least think about that question, be ready to be upfront with the developer if they do ask you, would you be willing to entertain any of these things? What our answer is going to be.
I think you could also change the word will to would consider, and that would be less definitive.
Fair.
I also thought the word any. Take away any. We might. It depends. It's not anyone. And yeah, but I don't know. It's just a question you had. I wanted to have us talk to. I think. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Tax-wise, I think my feeling is any tax benefits that exist should be available or on the table for us with a developer. I think helps if it's open enough that we can have that discussion with them.
I was just going to say that there's a lot of opportunities for different programs at the state level, federal level, provided that the request, we've already said that regardless, we want to see it on the tax rolls for the town. At the town level,
Right.
if we are saying that it is back on the tax roll, it's being developed, and the partnership that they're asking for is to partner with the municipality in order to obtain various other abatements and exceptions at a state or federal level that make their project be able to come to fruition. I have no problem working on that, but I don't want to see a developer coming in saying, we can only make it work if we don't have to pay taxes to your town.
Right.
Outside of that, I'm fine with putting in the legwork of hearing the proposals and seeing what that looks like.
Good.
Okay.
Would you like me to change the language to be more open or leave it as it is?
Well, if we are willing to cooperate with them, or maybe not cooperate, discuss, I don't know, I'm not,
Consider. I think the word consider was used. I mean, maybe that's the better word.
yeah, I think if
We
you
would
want to,
consider any of those things. Not automatic, but it's not we're open to it, right?
We'll consider working with the developer in pursuit of,
yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think we want someone to be successful, so we want to help
Right,
where it makes sense.
right.
And we'll review this proposed language with our partners at the Regional Planning Agency and the state, because they oversee that process, just to make sure that we have addressed it in the correct way to at least describe the fact that you're willing to consider.
Okay.
But we're not guaranteeing anything at this point.
I feel like if there's some box that requires a couple of years of the town's involvement to ensure a state or federal level incentive that's longer, I think I'd be open to still having the conversation. Just don't want to close the door on the conversation.
Right.
Okay, enough on that for tonight?
I've got plenty to work with.
Excellent. We'll keep you busy, then we're good. No. No, thank you for all your work on this,
Yes,
and I think
thank
we
you.
got some great
For sure.
direction out of it tonight, so
Yeah,
excited to see the next draft.
Yeah, I will send out a new draft. Feel free to send over anything else you notice that needs to be addressed.
Will do.
Thank you
you,
very
Brian.
much.
Next topic, discussion regarding Amoresco request for alternative on-bill credit agreement and professional owner's agent services through Beacon Integrated Solutions.
I'm carrying this for 2 meetings.
I'm sorry?
I said we were carrying this for 2 meetings.
Oh, yes.
And you had one question that you needed me to reach out to the consultant and ask. And I just wanted to close the loop on this one. So the question was in regards to would going into this potential agreement, and again, the stage that we're at right now is just considering whether or not you want a consultant to take a look at what this program is and whether or not there's a benefit to the town. But could potentially going into this program disincentivize or make it harder for the town to pursue other energy improvements, such as solar panels on town buildings or the sludge landfill, things of that we've sort of conceptually discussed, but we don't currently have in the works. I have reviewed that concept with the consultant, and they clarified that under the scope of service that was presented to you, there's the beginning part where they would do a multi-year analysis of what our capacity is. So not only looking at what we consume and what potentially we could take in terms of those onboarding credits from the solar project, but we could also carve out a capacity that we also want to reserve for the future if we needed, say you were going to put solar on top of the school, and we needed to carve out what that potential solar generation could look at. It would minimize how much, in terms of credits, we could take from a solar project, but it would be part of that analysis.
Okay.
So the proposal itself does not need to change to include that work. That's already part of that initial review that would be done on your behalf, if you even wanted to consider going through this.
Thoughts? At the end of the day, Brian, I believe you already said that it would be the interested party who is going to pay for this analysis for us to review, so there's no cost to the town to
Correct.
understand the option further, and no obligation to act. Although I
Correct.
don't necessarily want to waste someone's money if we're not
Right.
interested. So
Right.
just,
Correct.
even if they are providing it, I don't want to do it if there's no chance that we're going to consider it. Consider doing it.
What is the cost to
I
this
don't
firm?
know. Is that in there?
Yep, it's the last page.
Oh, okay.
You've worked with Beacon before, it's page 12 of the proposal. Let's get back
So it's 5,000 plus
And that's a not to exceed.
T&E.
Beacon only bills us for their hours actually used on the project. And so the past 2 engagements that you've had with Beacon have been not to exceed, and they truly only bill us for the hours that they work on.
Got it. For the size and scope of project we're talking about here, I feel that feels less bad, but I still don't want to waste it. But it doesn't
Yeah,
sound, it's not a huge amount of money in the
Right.
scope of what we're talking about
Right.
here.
Yeah, it's not. You're talking about, up to 31 hours. It's not, we're not asking for,
No, it's
Weeks
not
and weeks
tens
and
of
weeks.
thousands
Yeah,
of dollars
no,
analysis here, so.
yeah.
So I guess we don't have anything to lose by venturing into this, so.
No.
And just to, I know we had this clarification when we discussed this last month, but the consultant would be contracted by the town directly. The developer would be paying the consulting fee to the town directly. So the consultant is not in contract or working directly for the developer. So the relationship is between the town and the consultant, as it always has been.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the work product is property of the town.
Correct.
Yep, okay. I guess I don't have any concerns.
I have no
I still
concern.
don't know that I would be interested in it, but I
Yeah.
don't know enough.
Right,
So hopefully
right,
this will help.
Right, right.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is, for me to make a determination of whether or not we would go forward with it without having the information is
Not gonna happen.
It's not my area of expertise, and if they're willing to do it, it's not, like you said, 10, 20, 30,000. It's a small amount of time
Yeah.
to give us some more information on whether or not we want to move forward with it. I don't have a problem with that.
So would the three of you be
Agreed.
willing to authorize me to engage the parties on this?
Yes, and just want to make sure it's Beacon.
Beacon Integrated, correct.
So I'll make a motion to authorize Brian Smith, Town Administrator, to engage the services of Beacon Integrated Solutions for the purpose of,
From the first page.
I'm trying to scroll back up,
Professional owners, agent services in support of understanding an alternative on-bill credit agreement with Amoresco,
Thank you.
funded by, paid for by Amoresco
That's going to be his motion.
in the amount, yeah, it is at this point, if you don't mind. I'll
No, that's fine,
take over.
thank you.
In amount to, not to exceed $5,000 plus travel and expenses.
I'll
Second.
second that. There you go, Bill. I started but didn't have all the language.
That's okay, I had it right in front of me, so I just jumped in rather
Yeah.
than,
I appreciate it.
did you get that, Brian? Is that good enough, and did you capture it?
Yes. Perfect, thank you, gentlemen.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Let's see. Review the select board memorandum regarding the proposed zoning amendments. Did everyone get a chance to review that? It came out just before the meeting.
Give me one
Yes.
second. I only got up until the bullets, so I just want to read
Okay.
the last couple of
Sure,
paragraphs.
please do. Take your time.
So that was in a separate attachment, wasn't it?
It was a
Correct,
separate
it came
email.
out maybe just before the meeting.
Yeah. So I would be in favor of VR being changed to a special permit for multi-unit development. Definition of multi-unit be changed to have no cap on the number of units.
And I think this differs from what we had originally requested last time,
Across
where
the
we're
board.
we're not referring to, we're kind of, I don't want to say indifferent, but not requesting a change in rural residential or
French King.
French King.
Yeah, I don't have any concern with
I think it's a little more focused based on all the
Yeah.
feedback and concerns.
Right.
I worked with Brian to try to hone in on the specifics that really align with what we were concerned about and trying to move forward, as
Yeah.
opposed to the overall
Yeah.
entire table, which
Yep.
brought more concern.
Yep. I don't have any concern with this.
And then it just added at the end, just some stuff around timing. If they do feel supportive of something similar to the March STM, if we can do that, and if not, we can always come back to the table and sort that out. I did reflect a little further on some of the conversation, was thinking if, just hypothetically, if the planning board, in the discussions last week and stuff, if the planning board came back and didn't feel that VR being already, in some areas very cramped housing, lot sizes are very small and stuff, having like an uncapped multi-unit, it may be more supportive of us amending our RFP for the former Pleasant Street School to call out a friendly 40B, because that parcel may be acceptable in VR for something larger than 3 or 4 unit. But maybe if, and I'm being presumptive, if the planning board came back and said we don't feel VR in general is supportive of larger unit developments, that may be a path we could consider for that specific property,
Right,
because
right,
it is different than the rest of
It is a
VR.
much
When I think
larger
about
parcel.
Park and Central and some of the housing
Yeah.
in there
They're very
versus
small lots.
so
I think
Yeah.
most of those are quarter acre.
they're
at
very
best.
small. I would never personally think that a 6 unit or something would fit on one of those. It would make sense. So, so anyway, just putting it out there, but I think we should hear back from them and
Okay.
then go from there.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So go ahead and
Send it off.
send that over to the planning board for their next meeting, which is a few days before our next meeting, correct?
20,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, great. Passover meeting minutes. FY 2023 fuel procurement, diesel, heating oil, unleaded gas.
Looks like your recommendation is to stay with current vendors?
Correct. We haven't had any operational concerns with the vendors, and I've checked in with all the facility managers. They all expressed agreement with extending for the 3rd year.
So I make a motion to extend the fuel procurement service contract for the stated vendors and term in fiscal year 2023 as follows: Roberts Energy, LLC diesel fuel, Dennis Burke, unleaded gasoline, Robert Energy, LLC, number 2 heating oil, and what's that, Sprague?
Sprague.
Sprague?
Yep.
Number 2 heating oil, term of July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2023.
Just a friendly amendment to the last two. The Roberts Energy is number 2 heating oil, trailer transport.
Yes.
And the other one is metered pump truck.
Correct.
Okay.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Review of the memorandum of agreement with the Franklin Regional, with the FERCog. I don't know why I'm stalled on that acronym today, for the Bridge Academy. Franklin Regional Council of Governments, there we go. Goodness.
Brian, I had a question on the amount of $2,113 for each of the 1 officers. So that's not saying that there's only 1 officer?
I can answer that. I spoke with Chief about this.
Okay.
It actually, and Brian, it actually is, because at the time that they requested this, we only expected to have 1 who would be in that state at that time, because of the timing of upcoming full-time academies.
Right.
At the time of this request from the FERCog.
Okay,
Obviously, our current state is different than it was then.
right.
I don't know how that'll change, or if we can do anything else. We can't. The allocation's set, right?
Well, I think at this point, you're looking at the Bridge Academy is starting soon.
Right.
And
We're only looking at 1 for that anyway,
right.
potentially, if at all, right?
Because it's all by alphabet.
Yep, right. So,
Other than that, I have no concern.
I'll make a motion that we engage in the agreement for services by and between the town of Irving and the Franklin Regional Council of Governments, who has a typo in their headline there, sorry, for police reform earmarked for officers to attend the Bridge Academy training. Effective January 1st, 2022.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And Brian, at the top of that agreement, it says by and between the town of Irving and the Franklin Regional FERCog
Of government?
of Governments.
Perfect.
Just if you want to
It's
make a
probably-
little correction before we submit that back to
I
them.
can edit that and send it back to them.
No wonder I can't spell what FERCog is there.
And do you have, is there somebody that you want to execute the agreement?
Make a motion. Well, hang on a second. What does this even say on it? At the bottom here.
This one they left blank.
Yeah, it doesn't say so.
Move that we have Town Administrator Brian Smith execute the agreement.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Review of, or ratification of the agreement with the New England Police Benevolent Association Local 121 regarding indemnification and remittance of union dues.
Make a motion to approve memorandum of agreement between the town of Irving and the New England Police Benevolent Association regarding indemnification of town for deducting and remitting union dues to New England Police Benevolent Association.
That's a mouthful.
That is a mouthful. I will second that.
Any concerns or discussion?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
So I will have that in your box for signature tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
And this is only a stopgap until the contract is
Correct.
ratified. and
This
then
will
it
be
gets
an
folded
article
into-
in
yeah.
the
This will be
full
part of, yeah,
Part
this
of
is
the
the,
contract,
this
yeah.
is the interim.
Correct.
Yep.
Okay. We've already covered the operating budget request, so I believe, other than executive session, that is the last item of business. Is there anything else anyone has?
No.
Okay, then I move that we go into executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining. If an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the public body, which I do so declare, New England Police Benevolent Association. Is there a second?
Second.
We will not return to regular session. It's a roll call vote. When I call your name, please affirm by saying aye or opposed say nay. Scott Bastrash,
Aye.
William Bembry,
Aye.
Jacob Smith, aye. Thank you all. Have a good evening.